And here we go. Hi, everybody. People aren't here yet. I suppose I should tell the internet that we're going live. Internet, hear me now. Oh, I suppose I'll need the link to that. If you get in here and you can hear me okay, I would love to know that because this is my first time streaming to YouTube only from my desk here. And so I would just like to know that it's working because I'm like that. We are probably going to stop using Twitch and just use YouTube. This is where people start giving me their bad takes on that. No, I hate you. I hate you so much. I don't know why they hate me, but they do. What's really interesting is it might be that no one can hear me. Wouldn't that be interesting? It does say that there's no audio, doesn't it? Can you guys hear me? Turn myself up a bit. Well, I can move this thing closer to my face. That's about the extent of the technology I have to turn myself up. I think I could also turn myself up here. No, I am already. This is as loud as Colin's gonna get. So, yeah, I'm gonna let people connect for another minute or so. I probably should put it on the Facebook page, and then we'll get started. And this is the most excited I've been in a really long time. So we'll hope that I can talk at a reasonable pace, and not just go because that's how excited I am. Boop. You guys can see me okay? All right. So far we have some number of people watching. YouTube doesn't tell me. Ah, here we are, 25 people. Okay. I can make myself louder if that's what you're looking for. Yeah. Largo factorum delicita, largo, la 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 la. Yeah, I could just whatever you guys want me to do. Or what I used to do for the kids when they were little. United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica, Peru, Republic, Dominican, Cuba, Caribbean, Greenland, El Salvador, too, Puerto Rico, Colombia. Do you think I know the whole thing? Of course I know the whole thing. All right. All right, I'm going to give it like one more minute and then we're going to get rolling. So excited. Finally, I get to tell you who has the shelf. Not really. Not actually. I did not go to LVO. I did not. I did have some FOMO about that. And then there was OMO. Wait. There was this MO after the FOMO. I did feel like I was missing out, but I unfortunately for my family's safety and my own crazy brain anxieties, I had to stay home. But I spent the weekend building the thing I'm about to tell you guys about, and that was more fun than going to LVO. So I'm going to mute myself and blow my nose, and then we're going to get rolling. No, this is not the Biff Pod OnlyFans. That's not what we're doing. All right. Here we go. Are you guys ready? Are you hype? Is there appropriate amounts of hype in the audience? Let's see. All right, here we go. Welcome to Best... Not really. This isn't actually Best in Faction at all. Hi everybody. I'm Colin. For those that are listening to me for the first time, like Rob Hartford, I am the host of one of the three hosts of the Best in Faction podcast. I also organize and run Charity Hammer. I'm a avid 40K tournament goer. And have won a bunch of tournaments, and this is a pretty serious part of my life is Warhammer 40K. But this podcast is for people a lot more than just the 40K community, and that'll make more sense to everybody in just a little bit. For those that do know me from 40K, I really, really love doing the podcast, and it started as an event, as a kind of a journey. The original story of our podcast was that Mitch and I were new to competitive 40K, and we were going out and trying to make it work and trying to do it. And a lot of the episodes were about learning how to play and learning how to play competitively and how to have poise at the table. And what ended up happening is that it started being a lot about how crazy Colin's brain is, and also about the crazy list that Mitch makes. And then it continued evolving, and now our show is more like a bunch of veteran members of the competitive scene whose friends are all in the competitive scene, who just kind of talk about the state of the game and strategy and the community, and also, contribute a lot of our efforts to things like Charity Hammer. So the show has changed. It's not the same show that it was before. And part of that was starting to talk more about being the best people we can be. I strongly believe that the most important thing to be is the best person you can be, and to strive for that and focus on that. And I know that especially some of my early opponents in 40K probably think that's funny, because I was very questionable at the table in my first year of playing competitive 40K while I was figuring out how it all works. And so we started doing a thing on the show on Best in Faction called Better Human, Better 40K. And we spent 4 episodes, and we talked about things like owning your mistakes and learning from them, being someone who makes things happen, not somebody that things happen to, and not blaming your dice, but instead figuring out what you can impact to do better next time, and using vulnerability as a tool to make better connections with your practice partners, with your teammates, with your friends. We talked about a lot of stuff that was really about being a good person. And as we did our 100th episode, and we ended with our tearful discussion of what it has meant to Chuck and Mitch and I was left with a kind of euphoria about the thing that had been built. I was very on edge with excitement, like very ready to do something more with it, and I didn't know what. So I went to sleep that night, and I woke up the next morning, and I started off thinking, Biff Pod is such a big thing, I shouldn't be the one that's in charge of its promotion. I'm not good at internet marketing. I'm not good at production quality and making sure we have, welcome to Best in Faction as a recording and all that stuff. In fact, the logo's wrong in some places. None of that's what I'm good at. What I'm good at is finding people that have things to tell you guys about, that are interesting, and people that can entertain you and that can welcome you into their lives and make your lives better. That's what I'm good at. And so I was trying to think of, how do I take Biff Pod to the next level? And I thought about literally selling out. I thought about going to another network that can help us build more. And I thought about that, and I talked to a couple networks, and I thought about it, and I thought that the problem is that Biff Pod has this very Ted Lasso, not Seinfeld vibe. And for those that aren't from America or don't know our pop culture, Seinfeld's an incredibly popular sitcom from, I think, the 90s. And it's very funny, but everyone in the show is terrible to each other. That's the premise. They're all awful people. Whereas Ted Lasso always has heart behind it. Even when people are mean to each other, there's resolution and there's love and there's affection. And Biff Pod has tried to be more like Ted Lasso and less like Seinfeld. And I'm not saying that the other podcast networks out there are like Seinfeld, but I didn't feel like there was one that I could just drop Biff Pod in comfortably and feel like it would have the vibe that I wanted. And so I started talking to people, and I realized that we needed a network. We needed a tabletop gaming network that did have that vibe, and it was important, and it was a thing that needed to exist, and it was a thing that needed to exist more than I needed to focus on winning at 40K. So as of right now, I'm announcing Best in Tabletop, a completely focused tabletop gaming network of content that is debuting tonight. And in phase 1, there are 6 new shows to join Best in Faction. Best in Faction, Biff Pod will remain normal. It will remain the way that it is. It might improve. I won't be doing the editing or marketing for it, so that'll be an improvement. But it will continue the way that it's going. We're not changing it. Chuck and Mitch and I are going to continue doing that show. It's going to be every other Sunday. The next episode Sunday at 10 a.m. Great, okay? But here's what's happening. I have started a company called Best in Tabletop with some of the greatest people I have ever met in my entire life. And I am going to create, over the next few weeks to a few years, a Warhammer 40K content incubator. I'm going to take people that have good ideas, and I'm going to put my knowledge of content creation behind it, and my business knowledge behind it, and I'm going to help them make money and get paid for making content. I'm going to make a grown-up, good human network of content where all of the people that are doing the work are benefiting not only in their ego, which does matter to them, obviously, but also financially. And I'm going to build it, and it's going to be huge, because I know how to do this. And I built a business model for this years ago, and I just didn't pull the trigger, and now I am. So it was my idea, and I'm starting it. But from this point in the conversation, I'm pivoting from I to we. And I hope that I'll be able to say we for the rest of the time that I do this, because it's not mine anymore. Now it's a bunch of people's. So let me start off with the people that are giving this leadership. I'm running this new network, and I'm also serving as the creative director. I'm going to be involved in the shows that are being created and the content that's put on the network. If you have questions, I'll be your guy for that. Chuck Arnett is from the Best in Faction podcast, will be serving as the artistic director. He'll be working on creating logos and artwork and things we're going to send out, and he'll be working on making the streams work as good as he can. He'll be helping Tyler Agee, who is the guy behind the tech of Charity Hammer. He'll be working with him to create the best streaming hardware and framework we possibly can. We want it to look good. We want it to be easy to follow. He'll be in charge of that. There's a wonderful guy in the Northeast that I've become really good friends with over the last little while here named Mark Murphy. Plays a lot of 40K up there. Mark has an extensive background in marketing. He will serve as our chief marketing officer for this journey, and he's actually just hired a part-time marketing coordinator named Sean. Why am I telling you all this? Oh, we also have a full-time editor that's going to be doing the editing for all the content. Why am I telling you all of this? So that I can now tell you about all the content, because that's what you care about. But before I do want to share something with you guys. I wanted to talk about what the focus of the network is, and Mark, the head of marketing, wrote a vision statement. And you guys almost always hear what I have to say. I love the vision statement that Mark wrote, so I'm just going to read it to you because I want to share. I want to share it with you because I think he absolutely has what I had in mind and what we're going to try to deliver. Best in Tabletop Network has been built around a very simple but powerful ideal: that being the best at tabletop gaming extends far beyond simply winning. Being the best means being a consummate sportsman, rising above even the most tense situations with frustrating opponents. Being the best means being a passionate part of the hobbying journey, continually striving to improve regardless of skill. Being the best means doing what's right for your mind and body, ensuring that you're able to achieve at the table and beyond. Best in Tabletop Network has been created to bring all those facets of the game we love together to improve ourselves, our communities, and the game we love. And that is what Mark wrote. My correction to that is I'm adding a few words to the end of it that says, while entertaining you, because that's the part that's missing. Okay. The whole point here, the whole entire point is I want to make an entertaining 40K and tabletop gaming in general network that helps people be a better person and reach their goals better while also being entertaining. That's what we're doing. And to kick it off tonight, to kick it off right the heck now, I want to tell you guys about some of the shows. The first show is called 40K Fight Club. 40K Fight Club is a weekly meta-analysis show every week, and it's going to be for an hour and a half, and they're going to tell you this is who won tournaments last weekend, and this is how their lists work, and this is why their lists work in the meta, and this is how their meta looks, and they're going to dig in, and they're going to analyze that. And the problem with that show is if you try to do it like 40K Stat Center, which was an amazing show that I loved, if you do it like they did it, it's too much work. The reason it was too much work, and I'm not speaking for Falcon, I'm speaking for me watching Falcon and Val. 40K Stat Center was amazing, but it was a lot of work because the way that they got to explain to you how the lists work was they interviewed people. And that's a way to do it. Unfortunately, some of the best players in the game aren't actually good at describing how their lists work. So what I did is I thought about who can I have do this show that will just know how the lists work and will just understand how the meta is working and can speak to those things with experience. So the main showrunner of that show is a man who just won Best Drukari for the ITC season, despite it being his first full season in 40K. It is a man who got 8th place, or in the top 8 rather, at LVO, and won a phenomenal number of tournaments. It's from a man that knows how to beat the absolute crap out of you, and has been learning to do it since he was a tiny child. And that man's name is Anthony Vanilla. Anthony will be the showrunner for 40K Fight Club every week on Tuesday nights. Next up, he's going to need somebody that has a breadth of knowledge that he doesn't have. And one of the things that occurred to us is that the U.S. Coverage of the competitive scene makes an assumption that only competitive 40K is played here. Now, again, 40K Stat Center did a great job of this, but the podcasts that currently exist are very America-focused. And so I wanted to grab somebody that I thought would do a good job and would also bring an incredible amount of knowledge of the European 40K scene. And for that, we have grabbed the captain of Team Scotland for the WTC, a man who has top 4'd in LGT just this last year. He's won majors. He's won GTs. He is a phenomenal player that's been around for an incredibly long time. He does nothing but 40K. That's his entire life. And his name is Innes Wilson. And he will be joining Anthony every week. Now, if I'm getting Innes and I'm getting Anthony, and that level of energy and enthusiasm is going to be brought in, Innes Wilso, we can call him Innes Wilso, that's fine. When I'm going to bring that level of hype, I also wanted to add the kind of analysis part of this, the math and the numbers. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's a fantastic article being written every week for Frontline Gaming. And the fantastic article is called, and I had the name wrong, so I'm going to read it rather than just telling you guys, because I literally had the name wrong. It's called 40K Meta-Analysis. And it is a friend of mine who is getting his PhD, and yet somehow has time to spend all of his time on my Discord talking to people. I don't know how those two things go together, but somehow they do. I've had a lot of chance to talk to him, and I know that he is a phenomenal human and a great member of the community, and he has just won his first GT, and his name is Nathan Henning, and he will be coming on and bringing the data. But we're not stopping there. Because one of the things as a data nerd that bugs me is some of the visualizations of data we have in the community, and also the lack of education we're due for what those mean. So we're also going to include occasional correspondent statistics and data visualization expert Cliff Thomas will also be on the show on the regular, bringing visualizations of the meta and explaining what they mean and how to interpret them. So that is our show for Tuesday nights every week. And I think it's going to be really amazing. And the reality is, I wanted to launch all of this like 2 weeks from now. I wanted to have all the logos done and the theme songs already and the stream overlays done and all the marketing in place and the Facebook page and the YouTube. I wanted to have all that done. And then it occurred to us that LVO just happened and this show needs to talk about LVO while it's still relevant. So what we've decided to do is soft launch. We've decided to bring the content out and let you guys start enjoying it, and I will build the structure of the network around it. The intros will appear magically, and the websites will get updated, and we'll just let you guys start enjoying it right now. Speaking of enjoying it right now, wouldn't it be amazing if those three guys were here right now? Wouldn't that be great? That would just be wonderful, wouldn't it? Let's see if we can find them. Let's see if I just click this button here. Oh my gosh, look at that. They're all here. All three of them. I don't know if we're going to be able to hear them because we're doing this through tech in a new way. Can we hear you, Anthony?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's find out. Let's find out from the audience if they can hear Anthony, Innes, and Nathan, who, as soon as I am done telling you guys about the network, will be doing the very first episode ever of 40K Fight Club. They will be talking about LVO, and I think they're talking about the other tournaments from the weekend too. And it really is a coincidence that they're here. You're right, Sam. But I'm presuming that they can hear you guys. So let's start off with letting Anthony talk about why he's so hyped. Why are you so hyped, Anthony? Why do you want to do this?
My existence is hype, Colin. I am always just the harbinger of the excitement. But I'm super excited specifically about doing this show because I think it'll bring a unique perspective from the three of us that isn't really seen in a lot of the content creation that goes on now, and I'm just excited to be able to share my thoughts and Innes's thoughts, Nathan's thoughts, as well as occasionally Cliff's with others. I know that for my own development and knowledge, that like being able to be involved in the Biff Pod community originally, now what will be the Best in Tabletop network, has been great for my own growth, and being able to share that with others, I think, is really important.
That's wonderful. And Innes, how would you describe your hype? Why are you excited?
I am super excited. As I'm sure some people know, I used to have a podcast a few years ago in Scotland called Caledonian Deathwatch Radio, and unfortunately that petered out a couple of years ago, and I've really been missing that content creation. I've been doing some stuff through my Twitter and also like some random things through the Discord. Like I've done some basically Google Documents and YouTube videos to help people out, and I've always really enjoyed that feeling of trying to help elevate people, sharing what I know as much as I can. It's not something I've had a lot of focus on. I've been going through university and a few other things recently, but having the opportunity to go now without having to do all the ground effort is just, I can't wait to give back to the community that's been so helpful to all of us over the few years.
Yeah, and I would just add that Innes is at a really interesting point in his life too, because you're 25, right?
Yep.
And how long have you been playing competitive 40K?
Oh, competitive 6, 7 years.
Okay, so think about what percentage of Innes' life that is. And then for those of you that are old like me, realize what phase of life Innes is in right now. We're going to be along with Innes on a very, on like 25, that's big time adult. That's when you're deciding on who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And we're going to do that while he talks about wrecking people at 40K. I think it's going to be just wonderful to take that level of veteran experience and put it in youthful exuberance. I think wonderful. Great. Thank you for starting so early. It'll make a better show. All right.
Happy to help.
Nathan, why so hype?
I mean, I'm mostly very hype, but also confused. But hype because I love the vision statement of this network, and I've loved the community that BiffPod has provided. So I'm really excited to be a part of it, and also to bring that same community to everyone else now as well, and to push that really far forwards. I'm also really excited to bring stats to people in an understandable and interpretable and useful way, which is something that Stats Center used to do, and that kind of went away a bit, and now I'm very excited to bring it back. But I'm so confused because I started an article just 4 weeks ago, and now I'm doing this, which is a lot. It's great, though.
Yeah, if you want a lot of free time, don't be friends with Colin. It's basically a big, is a really good lesson there, Nathan. Nathan's pretty much brand new to the competitive 40k scene, and so he brings something that Anthony and Innes can't bring, which is the beginning of the journey. I know Anthony's relatively new, but he's not at the beginning of the journey by literally anyone's definition. So, very excited to have Nathan participate. Okay, I'm going to hide you guys away and finish telling them about all the shows that we're launching, and then we'll be back to you guys for 40k Fight Club. So let me hide them away again. And it's all Colin all the time. Great, okay. All right, guys. So that's pretty hype, huh? I didn't know that those were the three people I was going to get to do 40k Fight Club when I started talking to them, and it's perfect. It says Nathan has won his fair share of events at GTs. I think he's won one. Just so he's nodding on the screen you guys can't see. Okay, next up. So that is 40k Fight Club. The next show. Remember how I said that Biff Pod started out as kind of a youthful journey into competitive 40k? People loved that. They liked rooting for us, and they liked hearing how we were doing, and they liked the lessons that were learned as we went. They really enjoyed that. And we can't give that anymore. In part because Chuck, Mitch, and I aren't going to as many events as we once did. And sorry, this you listening to me right now means I'm not going to be going to as many events either, because I'm going to be doing a lot of different stuff. But as we think about it, as I thought about it, there's a place for that show that we started to be created again. But I needed the right people. I'm supposed to be saying we needed the right people to do that show. And I thought a lot about who it should be. And I realized that I have three friends who are 22, 22, and 24. An age so young I do not remember it. I do remember that I was an a-hole at 22, but beyond that I really don't know. And all three of them are incredible at 40k. They're just incredible at it. However, they've not won a GT yet. The three of them are working on starting to win GTs and majors, despite being absolutely incredible at the game. They're also articulate, and they're sharp, and they're just going to do a great job. So we're literally going to call this show Biff Pod, The Next Generation. They're not quite 20 years younger than Mitch, but they are definitely 20 years younger than Chuck and I. And so we're going to call it Biff Pod, The Next Generation. And its showrunner is going to be Tyler Bortel. Tyler has been on the show before to talk about Tyranids. He is a very serious Tyranid person. He also has a degree in something silly like quantum computing or quantum physics or something insane sounding. He has been working as an editor for some of the Frontline Gaming content, and he is just such a exuberant and happy presence in the 40k community. He's always hype. He's always excited. He's not negative about people. And he's the perfect person for me to basically invite to be Colin, honestly, on Biff Pod TNG. He's going to be the showrunner. He's going to keep it organized. He's going to keep it driving. That's going to be Tyler's job. Next up with Tyler is going to be Tyler's longtime childhood friend and war boss with the mostest, Lucas Troller, who I was calling Trawler previously. I apologize. Troller, I've been educated on. Lucas is an incredible 40k player. He came to the Charity Hammer Prep GT and lost on the top table in the final round with Orcs pre-Codex against Admech. Like, he got shot off the table, but he still got there and played hard. He went undefeated at at two different GTs, I think, with melee orcs. He also got to the ghost round at LVO with melee orcs. He is a serious war boss that knows everything you guys can want to know about the game. And he is the perfect person, despite being an orc player, to be our Mitch. He is incredibly sharp. He has a lot of ideas. He's not quite as what's the word? He's not quite as outspoken as Tyler. So he's got a lot of nuggets to share with you guys about how to think about a 40k that you're really, really, really going to enjoy. Finally, we're going to add a little bit of Chuck to the podcast. You need a little bit of Chuck to Biff Pod. You gotta have kind of the calmer demeanor. I'm just gonna go win and it's gonna be fine, guys, because we're gonna have a great time. The kind of casual, relaxed demeanor about 40K. I'm serious about this, but I'm also a chill dude. And for that, we're grabbing Lucas's roommate, and Lucas and Tyler's a good friend, and another mainstay of my local meta, Nicholas Olsen Johnson. Nicholas Olsen Johnson, I've been calling Naj on the show, which I really enjoy, but Nicholas Olsen Johnson is the coolest name of anybody that's doing anything on the network. So we'll use the full name at the moment. So the three of those guys will be doing what's called Best in Faction, The New Generation. And it's going to be debuting Saturday morning, very Saturday, like 4 days from now. Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And they're going to do every Saturday unless they're at a GT or major is basically what they're going to do. And they're just going to put that content out. Now, I should have said, what we're doing right now is going to go out on the Biff Pod Discord, on the Biff Pod podcast stream. So you'll get all this. But from here, our YouTube channel will be rebranded as Best in Tabletop, and all of the shows will be on our YouTube channel. In addition to that, most of the shows, I'll explain why in a second, most of the shows will also be podcast feeds, and they will be their own feeds. So you won't have to download everything. 40K Fight Club will be its own. Biff Pod TNG will be its own. Best in Faction will be its own. So you'll be able to pick which show you want to download, but all of the content, all the video content, is going to be on the YouTube. So if you want to stay on if you want to know about that, subscribe to what is currently called Best in Faction on YouTube. It'll be changing over the next few days. Okay. So that's Best in Faction, The Next Generation, which will start Saturday morning. Then this Sunday, you'll get your next episode of Biff Pod, where we're going to talk about this network in more detail, but we're also going to have Alex McDougall on to talk about what it's like to get to the Final Four at LVO with Tyranids, with Forces of the Hive Mind. Alex is one of our favorite guests. It seemed perfect to have him on and talk about his journey. So we'll be doing that on Sunday. Yes, they'll be in podcast form, just to make sure everybody hears me on that. The next show is going to be called, we think, this one's name might change, but we're currently working on with the name Late Night Lore Fight. And Late Night Lore Fight is going to be a show about lore. We're going to sometimes play games. We're going to invite celebrity guests on. We're going to debate some things. We're going to talk about some stuff. And I'm saying we on all of this, but I'm not on the show. This show is going to be hosted by a gentleman you might have seen on Grim After Dark, who is hysterical. And boy, does he have opinions about the lore of 40K. But with those opinions come an incredible breadth of knowledge. His name is Taylor Pearson, but we call him Taylor. And he will be the showrunner for Late Night Lore Fight, which will be done at different times. It won't have a regular time slot that it appears at, but it will come out, an episode will come out every other week. His co-host. What are we going to do for a co-host for Taylor? Who could possibly keep up with Taylor? Who could possibly bring what is needed to counterbalance Taylor? What about the Falcon? Could the Falcon do it? I think he could, and he's agreed to. So we're going to add the Falcon to our network. We're going to add Mr. Bird-based 40K. And he's going to do that show with him, and we have another host queued up for the summer after his school is done. Then I'm just going to let be a surprise for now. But we have another host for that show as well. So we're going to be adding a lore show every other week to the network. And I'm hoping that it is hilarious and informative and great fun. And I can't imagine two people I'd rather have do that than Taylor and Falcon. Peter Colissimo, Falcon. So, caca! Yes, that's what I'm supposed to do. So that is show number 3. Show number 4. Show number 4 is called Best Painted. And Best Painted doesn't have a podcast, because Best Painted is a YouTube show done on how to prepare your armies for a tournament, how to get them ready quickly, how to keep them updated from tournament to tournament, how to manage owning large amounts of competitive armies, how to paint models, how to paint them quickly, how to do a great job. Who would do that show? How about Chuck? How about if Chuck does that show? Chuck is going to release 20-minute or so YouTube videos every other week about how to hobby. He's going to show, you how he gets ready. He has just bought an Outward Realms army and it's gotten assembled. He's going to be speed painting that Outward Realms army up to beauty. He's been doing cell shading on Marvel Crisis Protocol most recently. He's one of the best kit bash artists in the entire game, and he'll be showing you guys how to kit bash as well, I presume. And there's somebody in the chat who I legitimately said there was one show they'd be interested in, and this is the show, and they went, "Ooh!" So Chuck's going to be releasing this every 2 weeks. We've not done anything like that show before, so please be patient with us on the first few episodes as we figure out the tech. But the idea is to have video with Chuck's voiceover. That's the idea. So that is show number 4. And that'll debut next week as well. All of these shows are debuting this week and next week. So nothing, I'm not telling you about anything that you're not going to immediately get to enjoy. Okay. Next up is the official Outward Realms podcast. For those that don't know, there's a new game on the scene, Outward Realms. It's a different scale than 40K. It's a different rule set. It uses alternating activations. We've done some streaming on BiffPod about it. It's a fantastic game that I thoroughly enjoy, and it's created by former host of High Lords at the Game Table and one of the best Necron players on the planet, Michael Timpey. And Michael, I went to Michael and said, I want to be the home of your show. I want you to do a podcast. I want to be the home of your show. Michael was super hype about that. And so he's going to be talking about the lore as it develops for that game. He's going to talk about new releases, how the rules are changing, tournaments that are being run. He's going to do an every other week podcast. There won't be YouTube for this one, just a podcast. But he's going to release an every other week podcast with a great dude named Drew Bishop, who is a very successful member of the X-Wing competitive world. And Drew is really into Outward Realms and evidently a great talker, is what I've been told. And so they're going to do that show together every other week, and we're going to release that as well. So you guys are going to get a chance to learn more about Outward Realms. And hopefully the Outward Realms community will come and mingle with our community and get to know us. Because that's part of the idea of this network, is to do a lot of different games so that tabletop people can all find each other. Because guess what? While the rules of 40K are the rules of 40K, everything in our hobby chat on the Discord would be valuable to anybody in any tabletop game. Anything we talk about being a good person and competing at the table is valuable to anybody in any tabletop game. The communities really can come together more than they are. And Chuck's show, by the way, is also going to be hobby agnostic. He's going to do MCP. He's going to do Outward Realms. He'll probably do Age of Sigmar at some point. So that's what's going on for our 5th show. Now our 6th show. Not every show will be a weekly thing that appears on the feed. Some shows are going to be episodic based on what's going on. The first show I want to tell you about, the first of which will be coming out. When did the Custodies Codex come out? 2 weeks ago? So 2 weeks from now will be the first episode. Mitch is going to have a show that we're right now playfully calling Mitch's Codex Corner. I don't know that it'll actually be called that. But Mitch is going to do a show 30 days after a codex has come out. Not when the codex comes out. Not a week before the codex comes out. 30 days after it's released. And he's going to bring on the best people in the game at playing those armies competitively. And they're going to talk about what that codex means for the game and the meta and what armies look like and what you guys should be thinking about. And it's going to be about the most advanced reviews of codexes that you guys have ever heard. Because we're going to wait for them to percolate and bake a bit. That's two different metaphors for you. We're going to let them kind of get mature and get their FAQ hopefully, and then talk about them with the best people we possibly can. And that'll be on our YouTube, and we'll probably put that out on the Best in Faction podcast stream, but that's not decided yet. But that show will be 1 episode per codex, 30 days after the codex. So you will do Custodies and Genestealer Cult, and that's where we'll start. And then after Custodies and Genestealer Cult, which I suspect I'll be on the Genestealer Cult episode, so I will be a guest on some of this stuff, but I'm not hosting any of it. And then we'll do Tau, and then we'll do Craft World Eldar, and we'll be off and running on that show. Show number 7. And the final show of the network. Show number 7 is called Better Human, Better Gamer. And it is going to be an episodic seasonal show where I'm going to plan 6 or 7 episodes. It'll be the first season. And I'll release them weekly or semi-weekly for a while. And they're going to be about how being the best human that you can be will help you succeed at these games. We're going to talk about confidence, and we're going to talk about anxiety. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about weight. We're going to talk about real, actual, difficult stuff. And I'm going to try to have experts from mental health on, experts from the healthcare community. I'm going to try to make that a really valuable show for everyone in the tabletop gaming world about being the best person, the best human they can be. Better humor, better gamer. And that's going to probably be the last of the shows that debut because I am actually hosting that one. So, that is what's happening right now. In the next 2 weeks, you are going to get to see content from BiffPod, from 40K Fight Club, from BiffPod The Next Generation, from Late Night Lore Fight, from Chuck's Best Painted, from Michael Tempe's the official Outward Realms podcast, Mitch's Codex Corner, and Better Humor, Better Human, Better Gamer. While all of this is happening, I am working on Phase 2 content, because the ultimate goal, and you guys are going to think this is crazy, but I'm going to share it anyways. The ultimate goal is that this is a full-time tabletop gaming network where you can tune in whenever you want and something is happening. Now, will we get there in a year? No. Will we get there in 2 years? No. Can I get there in 5 years? You absolutely bet I can get there in 5 years. And so how are we going to fill the rest of the time? Right? How are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we're going to start streaming games again. I'm talking about Anthony streaming games where he's at in the Northeast. I'm going to probably it sounds like I'm bringing Wicked Wednesday Warhammer back again. Time slot wise, that's going to be brutal unless you're on the West Coast or are a late night person on the East Coast. Sorry, I can't do it any other way. But we're going to start doing Wicked Wednesday Warhammer. I'm going to start getting some Outward Realms and some Marvel Crisis Protocol streamed. We're going to add a show about Marvel Crisis Protocol's competitive scene, and I have the perfect host for it. I just got to figure it out. We're going to be there's going to be an Age of Sigmar competitive podcast. I don't know who's going to be on that, but I bet the Discord's going to tell me as soon as this is done. Mitch wants to do an episodic show called Big Talk with Mitch, where he gets guests on and they take an incredible amount of time to talk about things like why don't women play 40K, racism in tabletop gaming, cheating, TOing, clocks, all the big stuff that we love to complain about, but actually digging into it deep. He'd love to do that show. And by the way, I think he'd do an amazing job of it. So we'll be adding a lot more Phase 2 content. And all of this will be partnered with Charity Hammer, which is absolutely happening, and we're looking at end of June. I don't want to announce the Charity Hammer dates till all the facilities are locked in under contract, but it does sound like Charity Hammer will be at the end of June, and all of this network will put its full and entire support into Charity Hammer. We will add Marvel Crisis Protocol content to Charity Hammer. We will add Outward Realms content to Charity Hammer, even if I have to have 5 streams. We are going to make the biggest charity event in the history of 40K. Sorry, Nova. I mean, virtual, your in-person events are obviously a lot to pass. And we will absolutely, fully support Charity Hammer. Okay. What does this cost? Nothing! Everything I've just told you about is free. All of it. It's all free. We're going to support it with our patron group for now. I will tell you that I have raised the price of the patron group from $5 to $10. It's not actually live on the website yet, but it is raising. If you were already a member of that group, you are godfathered in, keep paying $5, that's fine. I'm moving it to $10 simply so there's more money to throw around at all the hosting fees and editing and everything for the whole network. So that's what's happening there. I will be adding sponsorship, so if you want to sponsor one of these shows, please reach out to me. I will be adding endorsements. I will be adding, and we'll probably also add some paywall content. I'm sorry, paywall content just is the least offensive way to monetize some of this stuff. So we'll be adding that as well. But for now, all the shows I just told you about are all free. They're all going to be free. They're all going to continue being free. They're all going to be online. You can get all of them. If you'd like to support us and you'd like us to build faster and you'd like us to make more content, please go to patreon.com/BIFPOD and get ready to pay $10 a month, because that's the main way that we're funding this. All of the money going into editing, going into hosting, all of that is coming straight from the patron group for BiffPod. And I'm also putting money into it. But that BiffPod fund has never been for me. It's never been for our pockets. It's always been for making content for you guys. And so now I'm just putting 100% of that money into this. And that is what we have going on. And I'm really excited over the next few weeks for you guys to see the YouTube channel change. Our Facebook page will change. There'll be new streams for all the different podcasts. And just enjoy it and be along for the ride. And the final thing I'll say before we kick it off to 40K Fight Club is we're going to practice what we speak. I strongly believe in vulnerability. I really do. And I'm going to be vulnerable with you guys along this process. This is hard. It's not something I've done before. It's not something Chuck's done or Mark's done or Nate Hennings has done or Anthony has done. It's not something that a lot of these people have done before. And it's not easy. And it's not going to be easy. And we are going to stub our toe. We're going to offend somebody at some point in time. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get content wrong. We're going to call somebody's list the way we shouldn't. We're going to make a video that's not good. We're going to do all of that. And what I'm going to ask is that you're patient with us and that you acknowledge that we're human and that we are going to make these mistakes. And look at what we do in response to the mistakes and please, please judge us based on that. If we do offend you, come to us and see what we say and let that be the metric for whether or not you like what we're doing, not when we make accidents. Because that is how, as a community, we're all going to grow together. With that, I'm going to stop talking. And I really appreciate you guys joining me for the last 45 minutes as I talked through how ridiculously excited I am, and we all are, to do this. It's what the community deserves. It's what the community needs. Remember, Lasso, not Seinfeld. And with that, it is my absolute honor to debut for you guys for the first time without any sound effects or theme song or any production that we have not had time to prepare. I am happy to introduce you guys to the very first episode of 40K Fight Club. 40K Fight Club starts now. Go for it, guys.
Suppose that means it's time to unmute?
Yeah,
we do have
like
intro music. We've edited it all and everything. It's ready to go. We've just not had time to put it all together. That is how quickly this has gone. It has been incredible.
It'll be in the podcast.
It will be in the podcast. So we're going to hand over to Anthony now. And Anthony, you want to run the introduction?
Yes. So let me just do. All right. So let's start with introducing myself. I am Anthony Vanella. I am primarily a Drukhari player. I'm the newest member of Team USA for the WTC. I just got 6th at LVO, and I was best in faction Drukhari for the year of 2021. I'm here to help guide you through the ever-shifting maze that is the 40K meta with my talented and wonderful co-hosts, Innes and Nathan, and I will let them introduce themselves as well.
Cool.
Innes, do you want to lead?
Go next, yeah. So, hi everybody, I am Innes Wilson. I am the current WTC team captain for Team Scotland. I am primarily a European player. I've not left Europe to play in events, but I've played across the continent. I've played in Serbia, Croatia, the Netherlands, England, Scotland, and I'm looking forward to hopefully making across to America sometime. As far as my accomplishments go, I'm not quite as storied as Anthony in the recent times, but in 2019, my team came 3rd at the WTC, or the ETC, out of 36 countries, which we were incredibly proud of. I'm my team captain. I top 4'd in LGT in 2019, and I won my first major this year as well, which was a really big deal for me. It's not something we'd happened before because it was the first major that had ever happened in Scotland, and that was like a massive achievement for me for this year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to growing with the podcast and hopefully sharing some of the insights. I've been playing 40K competitively for on and off 7 years, but the off was mostly the last year and a half where not a lot of on was on. But I've been playing 40K since I was 12 years old, so literally over half my life at this point. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to share what I can with people who, maybe don't understand things based on context because, well, it's a hard game. I think we all acknowledge that.
For sure.
Yeah. My name is Nathan Henning, and I will be your stats correspondent. I play all the elf factions, so I play Harlequins, I play Drukhari, and I play Eldari, and I sometimes try to mimic Anthony by bringing violence to people, but more patiently. I play in the Chicago area, and I play as part of the Grimdark Filthy Casuals group, typically, and I'm relatively new to competitive 40K. I've been playing for about 2 years, give or take, but only competitively for about a year. And like Colin said, I have one GT-sized event, which was just recently, which was quite a surprise. So I have at least done something 40K related to help, hopefully, with all of you thinking that I am not full of nonsense. But I will mostly be covering numbers, and I'll be doing mostly stats analysis, since that's what I do every day anyways, although in a laboratory setting. And then we'll also have Cliff, who will be giving me a big time assist because he is good at data visualization as well as addressing other issues as they come up within either the statistics side or in the meta side. And I could not do 90% of what he does because he's amazing at it. And he will be on periodically to do stuff like that as well.
Awesome. All right, so I mean, from there, let's get straight into it, gentlemen. The LVO was this last weekend. It's typically the biggest event in 40K each year, outside of the WTC championships. We had some pretty big storylines going into this one. We had the Machine King himself, the man who ended up winning it. He wasn't going, then he was going, then he wasn't going, and he ended up showing up. He came for his second crown in a row, which, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't been done before. I think he's the first to take it back to back. There was some big hitters from Europe in attendance coming through. Innes gave me the warning track on some of those boys beforehand, so I was able to play a good number of those folks. And then the meta was in a weird spot coming in, so let's hit those kind of in that order. Innes, you want to start with the Ziegler situation breakdown?
So let's start with Richard Ziegler. So Richard has obviously had a phenomenal last couple of years since he burst onto the scene in 2019. I want to say I didn't really hear much about him before then, and obviously he won the LVO in the 2019 and 2020 LVO, debuting the Leviathan list, but also putting in some incredible performances with Tau. And it was really, really interesting to see his progression this year, because he took Tau to ACO, Atlantic Open, back in sometime ages ago, and he came top 4 with Tau, which at the time I think was very impressive at the start of 9th edition. And then since then he's done 4 other events, including the 3 GW Opens, which he won all of. But what that ultimately meant was that coming into LVO, where we weren't sure if Ziegler was going to be attending, he had played 5 events, won 4 of them, top 4 to the last, and was sitting in double digits in the ITC with 5 events as, I believe, the only person in the top 100. So the big storyline coming into this was, well, is anybody going to stop Ziegler? And spoiler alert, no, nobody stopped Ziegler. There is a massive amount of respect that goes into doing something that can only ever now be matched, not beaten. You can't win the ITC with 5 events, but you can win it with 6. And now, how do you top Ziegler? Like, that's it. That's the end of it. So we're going to go through a little bit of that. We're going to talk about Ziegler's list when we get through into the section, as well as some of just the madness of what happened with the meta for Ziegler's list to do so well. The next storyline, if we want to jump into that, is the European big hitters. And Anthony, do you want to take point on that one a little bit? Just talk through what the expectation was coming in for that?
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, I mean, Manny was coming into this at rank 1. He was, he was wearing the ITC crown on his way into this event, and he was bringing the same list that he built, or that he had played at the Nottingham event the week prior. Absolute mad lad, by the way, playing 2 extremely large events just back to back. But he was playing Thin City, which is the opposite of my pride and joy. It is Drukhari still, so not complete opposite, but it's that 170 rack build and then just some beater characters. And he brought it quite far. He ended up into the shadow with myself and several others. But someone else from the outside the United States took him down and ended his run. A lot of people did really well. He actually, in his way to the top, slowed down his teammate Malik. I forget exactly how to pronounce his name. I believe it's Malik. And there was a bunch of other really high-level European players there. I played one in the 6th round, the captain of Iceland's WTC team. He was a phenomenal player. Up until the point that we played, he was actually the highest overall for battle points going into that round. The man was playing 30 Custodian Guard and just scoring 95 or higher in every game. So yeah, that's some of that. Nathan, do you want to tackle how in flux the meta was coming into this event?
So I've been covering the meta for the last 4 weeks in the weekly article series. So a lot of what I've seen in the meta is what we kind of have started to get a little bit more accustomed to going into LVO was that we have Crusher Stampede, which is big in the scene now, and kind of brought Tyranids, pure Tyranids, into the forefront. But the bigger thing that we saw was both Custodes and Genestealer Colts codexes get released, and we saw both of them come into LVO with a lot of expectation, especially for Custodies players. We saw a lot of big players switch over going into LVO. Players like John Lennon switched over. Jack Harpster, I believe, also played Custodes, but I think he may have played Custodes before. And I think a lot of us had very high expectations for some of the new books, but also for Crusher Stampede as an army of renown going in. And then there were also some people who had to think about Tyranids and Genestealer Cult and how to put them together into a competitive forces of the Hive Mind list, and we saw that also explode just really essentially for LVO. We hadn't seen those lists prior to LVO in the tournament scene.
Yeah.
So what we ended up seeing was a lot of that. I think we also learned that the best weapon against Innis's European players was Alex McDougall from Canada, since he took out 2 of them in a row.
Yep.
On his way to top 4ing.
Oh, the Americans couldn't even do it themselves.
Yeah, no.
We'll talk a little bit more because Innis Innis pestered me for the whole week of prep to make sure that I got us some European-centric statistics. So we have some European statistics for you guys to solve for a little bit later in the cast.
Okay, so I think that sets the stage pretty well for diving into some of the meta-analysis. So what we're going to do, how we're going to be breaking this down, is we're going to start with a stats focus. So we're going to go through some of the numbers with Nathan and run through the general event as a whole, what things looked like, what was going X and O, what was dropping 1 game, what was dropping 2, what were like the armies that were severely underperforming. And then after that, we're going to dive into some of the specifics, and then me and Anthony are really going to bounce off each other and try and get some analysis on why these lists work for some of the top lists. So let's dive into that with Nathan then. So can you tell us a little bit, Nathan, about just the general faction breakdown at the tournament? Like, what were we seeing a lot of? What weren't we seeing a lot of?
Sure. So, I mean, when we look at our overall faction participation numbers, we see a lot of kind of your standard tournament factions. We had about 26% Marine participation, which is pretty standard, I think, in most of 9th edition. But what we started to see in, especially for recent tournaments, is spikes in Custodies. We also see a gradual increase of Drukhari over time throughout 9th and for the last year, really. And so what we see at LVO is we had about 7% of everyone bringing Drukhari, and then we had about 8% of the player base bringing Custodies. And then we had a very small percentage who did very well, who brought Forces of the Hive Mind. We had only 10 players bring that. But when we look at the numbers, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, we see that the 10 players who brought it did very well. And we'll probably talk a little bit about new S-tier factions a little bit later when we break down how those faction participation kind of goes into overrepresentation at winning position, essentially. But for the most part, I think people are going to be pretty familiar with the faction participation. So you have what was the S tier kind of going in, or the A tier going in, the factions that have been winning a lot of events, which is Drukhari, you had Custodies, you had Grey Knights, you had Orcs. I think is kind of that top rung of factions going in, and those were all very well represented.
That definitely matches with my experience going to a bunch of the events lately, that, you know, you get past the 3rd or 4th round, you start running into lots of Orcs, Drukhari, Grey Knights, you know, you bounce into all that sort of stuff. You know, the higher you go, the more of it you see.
Yeah, there was a real kind of feeling going into the event from somebody who was looking at it on the outside that there was no clear, like, winning faction going in. Like, you couldn't predict it based on, you know, there wasn't. So in previous years, we've seen, like the 2019, you kind of expected it was going to be the Castle list or the Elder Plains list, which was the finals. Or we had the Breviathan list that just completely eclipsed everything else that was available at the time, except maybe the Raven Guard list, and that was the final. Coming into this year, there wasn't anything like that at all, and it was really interesting to see what people chose to play, especially when we didn't think Ziegler was going, because that kind of wrote off AdMech. Like, we maybe had Mark Hertel and Rickard Nilsson was on the sign-up list at some point, but only really Mark Hertel was in the running for putting in a really good showing with it. So I think AdMech was a little bit written off. So what were the actual standout codexes, Nathan? Like, what really stood out above the pack, like above the rest of the things that did well or did better than average? What was the What
So
stuck out to you?
So there are really 4 super high performing factions at the moment, and especially at LVO. We saw Drukhari, which everybody kind of expects Drukhari to do well at this point. And so about 28% of Drukhari players managed to get into that winning position of 5 or more wins at LVO. And then you have pure Tyranids, which is almost entirely Crusher Stampede at the high level, which is kind of what you've started to see in the meta over the last few weeks since they released that Army of Renown rules. And there was about 27% of those players made it into that winning position again, which is also very high. And then you had Custodies, who are like the real threat a lot of people were picturing coming in, especially with so many top players switching. And they did also do very well, and they kind of slot into that S tier kind of high performing tier that I would expect, and they got about 18%, but they're kind of the low end of S tier at the moment, which will be really interesting going into kind of the next couple of weeks where we see points drops for Custodies coming out from GW. So if you didn't like playing against Custodies, you were going to play against more Custodies, most likely. And then you had the madmen who brought forces of the hive mind, like Alex McDougall and also Tyler Bortel, who brought these Gene Stealer Cult, Twisted Helix, mixed with Leviathan lists, with artillery based in Hive Guard and stuff like that. And of the 10 players who brought it, so this is one of the lower participation factions, 2 of them made it basically all the way. So that's a 40% representation among winning, like in position to actually win the whole thing with 5 or more wins, which is quite an astounding number, especially for such a low faction participation of only 10 players at a 700 plus player event.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was incredible seeing the run that Alex and Tyler both went on. I believe Alex went down in the round of 4, and Tyler went down to Lucas, who's the other host of BiffPod: The Next Generation. He went down to him in round 6. So that was, between the two of them, they went 11-0, they went 11-1 in just the main event, which is incredible for a list that they basically theocrated themselves for this tournament. And honestly, really impressive, especially to just kind of take the meta like that. I know it was kind of a known quantity, like we had seen Leviathan lists before with Wars on Octarius, but getting the new Gene Circle Codex and implementing it so seamlessly was just really impressive, and I was really, really happy to see that top level players could do really cool things with that book.
Yeah, the pivot was really interesting. It actually picked up a bunch more points into the Gene Stealer Cult portion specifically after that got a new book. Before it was like obviously very Tyranids focused, and the GSC guys were just there because they give you those cool blips right at the beginning of the game.
Blips and Rod.
Yeah, blips and Rod.
That's all you really need.
Excellent.
Yeah,
but now
you're seeing melee just hard focus, right? Like 2 10-mans of pure strain Gene Stealers to come in from reserves that go all the way across the board, murder something, and then for a CP go back into reserves to come back in next turn to kill more stuff and then go back in again, right?
Yep, yeah, which is a sentence we would have had a laugh at going into the Gene Stealer Codex, the Cult Codex. The idea of taking pure strains at all would have been amusing, and now they're like one of the best melee units of the game.
Mm-hmm. It turns out if you staple a 4+ invulnerable save to almost anything, it's quite good.
I feel like it's the 4 attacks on the 2-up weapon skill, but I'm here for violence.
Hey, I enjoy not dying to Overwatch, and that's
I guess that's valid.
I mean, the strength 5 also
pretty good.
Also the free pregame move of 9 inches, so you can just go 9 inches and then advance and then first turn charge and annihilate something.
Or advance 6 as well. Okay. That's an option too. Yeah, and the other thing, because I'm a much more defensively minded player than Anthony, I started a game against Custodies with Gene Circle today, and my entire army had army wide -1 to wound from that mini transhuman, only being able to be wounded on 3+. And it's just nice, you know.
Yeah, it's down for sure.
All the jank of playing Harlequins, except you get to play a good faction.
Yes. Oh, poor Harlequins.
You cut me deep in this.
Yeah.
That is, after all,
don't hurt my clown feelings. It's true. Your goal is to hurt my little elf feelings.
Okay. So the next primary topic we have is we've looked at the 5-0s, we've looked at the X-0s. What's the consistency? Like, if you're just looking for, you want to hit that, you're a 3-3 player, you're looking to hit that 4-2. What's reliability? What's lighting up the middle tables?
So I mean, when you're looking at like not necessarily at the factions that are hitting S tier, right? You're looking more at A and B tier factions just based off of kind of where they position themselves at LVO. So this is only based off one event. So we can't necessarily broadcast it to like what things will do next. But I mean, for your A tier moving forward, you have Grey Knights and Orcs, and then you probably have Chaos Demons also fitting into there, solely based off of how they're represented among being in winning position. So what I did is I calculated how many of these factions that are being played, how many of them got 5 or more wins, and then how overrepresented they are. But that number also kind of gives us an idea of how many factions are just hitting that 3 and 3 and 4 and 2, right? And how many factions are doing just kind of probably more where we'd expect a balanced game to be, with all the factions doing relatively similar to their participation, is kind of the idea, right? Because you don't want something like Forces of the Hive Mind that's 30 times more represented at top tables than it is in the player population.
No, that sounds great. I love Hive Mirrors. They're really fun.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, Tau Empire did really well at this tournament, which is mind-boggling to me because everybody had kind of put them off as dead. But you have Thousand Sons, you have Mechanicus, you have Gene Stealer Colt actually doing kind of it around those 3-3, 4-2, kind of doing very average. And then you have some of the power armor factions, specifically Black Templar, and then you have Dark Angels. For Chaos, you have Demons, like I said before, and then you have Death Guard, who are kind of in those average positions. That's like A and B tier. And B tier is very large when you look at it this by method,
Right.
which is kind of what you'd expect. B is kind of what we want for our average factions. You do have some clunkers, which I guess I can talk about a little bit. I personally think Mechanicus is very good. And the general feeling and consensus that I've gotten among the competitive community is that the army still has really good rules. So for me, like an underperforming faction is AdMech. So they were in the B tier when I really thought that they could be higher. And a lot of the reason why they're even in the B tier is because Richard Ziegler came in and won the event. So they had a person come in, go all the way through, and put the faction into kind of that undefeated category. Otherwise, they only had something like a 44% win rate at the LVO.
I feel like
I'm reading my Excel sheet correctly.
I feel like that's a thing that's happened with AdMech for a long time now, where their like relative power to their performance hasn't always lined up. I don't know if that's some combination of their command phase being like super involved in the army in general, having a lot of buff tracking that has to go on to get them to their peak efficiency. But even for a while there, when like basically as soon as the AdMech book came out, there was a large period of time where like I was as playing the Drukhari Menace, I was much more scared of playing them than I was the Mirror, and that's tracked basically up until that data slate came out, where Thick City got released and then AdMech got punched a little bit. And yeah, they've just been incredibly powerful. They have all the things. They get the advance in charge, the fallback, and take your pick, shoot, charge, action, whatever they like. They have access to it, but a lot of it is so toolkit focused that it really requires like a higher level player, it seems, at least based on the stats, to make it shine.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw Richard Ziegler running out of time at every single of his upper table games, I think it's because you see that complication factor, especially in the command phase and doing other things, because it's a very like brain heavy list. There are some lists that are like a little bit less brain heavy that exist, but AdMech requires you to keep track of a lot of moving pieces. And in some ways, almost similar to some of the other like B tier factions, like Thousand Sons also have a lot of things to keep track of for Cabal points and stuff like that. And so that probably, I don't know what you two think, is why some of those factions don't do necessarily as well, aside from some of the other aspects of the Codex, obviously.
Yeah, it's one of those things where AdMech require a lot of allocating your resources very carefully. And when you're Richard Ziegler and you have 1,000 reps with the army and you understand the allocation of resources to a degree where it's kind of muscle memory, that works. And when you don't have that, it's an army that's liable to fall apart because maybe you take the +3 movement on the wrong turn and you take that and you have that -1 save penalty and your army folds and there's nothing you can do about it because you've mishandled what you should be doing. And that's something that AdMech are really prone to. Which I think is why we see them in the mid tier, because they're probably one of the scarier armies you can pull up against at a tournament. I never feel comfortable playing against AdMech because you never know how good your opponent's going to be at capitalizing on their power windows. The rest of the factions that you covered in that B tier are the ones that you're not like unhappy to draw them at a tournament, Anthony. I feel like that's kind of what you'd say. Like you pull Death Guard or something like that, you're kind of like, okay, this isn't a gimme, but I feel like I'm expected to win this if I'm playing a good faction. And that's where the B tier is kind of falling right now, and I think that bears out in the results. You get 4-2 because you're a good player, but you drop those 2 games because you played somebody who was as good as you on a faction with just better options right now.
Right. I think that Death Guard will always have a degree of limiting factor, and that, like, I mean, it's in their design that they're very slow. So they will always struggle in a game where the objectives are fairly far apart. I mean, just at a, like, without advancing, Death Guard will take 3 turns to touch the midboard. That is very slow by comparison to most other things. And unless they have, things built in to combat that, that will always be, somewhat to their detriment. As good as a player as you are, you cannot physically increase their movement characteristic without advancing and then losing access to all your other stuff because they don't have any advance and do X. But they do like trees. Forests don't slow them down, so that's cool.
Anthony, do you mind if I interrupt for just a
You just
second?
need a whole table of trees.
Yeah,
Anthony, do you mind if I interrupt for just a second?
absolutely. What you got?
A bunch of people have messaged me and said that I was supposed to take questions.
Ah,
And I didn't. So at the end of your guys' show, I'll stay on and answer questions about the network. So if you guys watching have questions, and maybe plug that a little later in the show as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
of course.
just thought I would chime in with that and say, yes, let's do some questions for them and me at the end here. Not that we're at the end.
yes. We got it. We got
You
plenty of
guys are
show to
doing
go.
absolutely wonderful. Please continue. Everybody's really enjoying it.
Great.
Awesome.
Glad to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that Death Guard will always be in kind of an awkward spot for that. I mean, I witnessed this personally, like one of my best friend and one of my teammates, Brandon Fox. I think he finished the season like 6th for Death Guard. He switched to Custodies for LVO, and he was immediately like blown away at like the breadth of options he had, merely by having 2 fast units. He was like, "This is incredible. These 2 bike units are amazing." And it was like, yeah, man, it's cool being able to go take an objective in your opponent's deployment zone without rolling a 9 at a deep strike. So yeah, stuff like that, just dynamicism in armies is a huge deal. And I think, especially if you're a newer player to the competitive scene specifically, if you're just new to the game in general, you should build what you think looks good. But if you're trying to play on the competitive side, I think picking an army that at least has some level of dynamics to it, where it's it's either quick or it operates in all the phases or some combination thereof, is a huge stepping stone in. But that has nothing to do with the LVO stats. Nathan, carry on.
No. So I mean, I'm actually going to transition us into Innes's favorite topic, which is me talking about the Europeans who came to the event and
everybody should talk about Europe.
kicked serious. I'm gonna say they kicked serious ass at the event. Let's be honest here.
He's burning his curse per episode.
I know, I'm burning it now.
He's burning it for me. I'm so proud.
Well, look at you
I'm
guys.
doing it for you, Innes. It's all about you, buddy. Exactly. And so I pulled out all of the European players that Innes told me about, and I did some calculations. So if I forgot you, I'm sorry, but it's Innes's fault, not mine.
I'll gladly accept the responsibility. If I missed you, it's because you're from a country I don't know the players in, and I'm sorry. I got all the Brits, and I got as many of the French and Spanish and other players that I could. If I have missed you, I am deeply sorry. I hope you went 5-1 and make our stats even better for Europe, because we look really good right now, guys.
I hope you got the
first
absolute titan that I played, because that man was a monster.
We did.
Yeah, you got Hadar. He's on this list. I made sure to pull him because he did really well. So, I mean, the average placement across 18 European players who I've got in my table is they placed in the top 100 on average. So that by itself is really good. But the even better part is that when I calculated their win-loss records and then averaged it out, your European players have an average win rate of 80%.
Whoa.
So the average European player coming to the United States to play was going at least 4-1 before dropping or something else happening, which is amazing.
We'll just like it on record that the Europeans are more overpowered in Drukhari and should be nerfed before we are. I don't know how you execute
Just wait
that.
6 months, Anthony. We'll be nerfed by then.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
perfect.
true.
Wait,
you're
that's too
actually
late.
nerfed already. The European
we're nerfed over here. That's why we don't do well. There is a bit of tongue-in-cheekness with the European stats, because you have to consider when you're looking at these that the people who came over are incredibly enfranchised 40k players, broadly we sent the best players over because they were the ones who were willing to travel cross continent in the middle of the current global situation. So we've got players like Raphael and Malik and Manny making the trip over. The average player was kind of like, maybe not this year, maybe I'll wait a year. So it does skew the stats a little bit. I'm not going to be disingenuous and say, yeah, we're all just clearly like 30% better than average. It's maybe only like 50.
But yeah, when you look at the numbers, you have David Gaylord, who went and got 5th overall, and he was the number 1 placed player going into the Shadow round, and he pre-qualified for the best of the top 8 after that. You also have Joffrey, who placed 8th overall. You have Manny Chima, who placed 9th. Taroxer, who I'm just going to assume that is his name, and placed 15th. Then you had Hadar, who is apparently the captain of Team Iceland, I believe is what was said at one point, and he placed 30th overall. And you have a lot of players who are in the top 50, with 7 players in the top 50. That's really good. So, I mean, while it is definitely all of the best players from Europe who probably came over because they have something to gain from coming over, either getting more ITC points to hopefully position themselves to win ITC overall, which maybe they should have reconsidered because Richard Ziegler decided to show up, kick the door open, and win the whole thing. But you can't always predict a last-minute change.
We did try to bribe Nick and John to hold him hostage and not let him out, but unfortunately, it just wasn't on the cards this year. Richard is unfortunately unstoppable. It seems to be in the United States, at least. The man cannot, or in the United States and North America, the man cannot be stopped. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does when he comes over to Belgium in August.
I'm gonna try.
And I do have a couple more notes about the European players. So we have Shadowblade, who tied Naden and eliminated him from the first time of getting into a top 8 at an LVO. You have the main weapon against European players, that's Alex McDougall, who eliminated 2 of them. And then you also have Anthony, who eliminated the captain of Team Iceland. So not unbeatable, but definitely you need very specific meta to counter the meta that comes over from Europe. Sometimes the Europeans themselves, because they also eliminated quite a few of each other.
Yeah, Malik played Zach Becker, the LGTTO, and also David Gaylord, and got knocked one out, and then got knocked out by the second. Malik and David are clubmates in London, so that has got to have been a sting of a round 4, round 5 draw. Cannot be enjoying that one.
Oh, 100%. And I didn't remove the mirror. So. Well, we did see that too a couple times in LVO, right? We saw some top level players draw each other, but not only that, like I think Brad Chester drew Manny Chima, if that's correct.
Brad played Manny in round 3. We had Ziegler Perry. I believe we had a couple of other war-offs.
Off the bat, we had Matt Evans and John Lennon just round
that's true.
1.
Which is like quite a big deal because like a lot of people were like, who is Matt Evans and why did he beat John Lennon? Which is unfair to Matt Evans, who is a very good player, who's just not as well known in the meta.
Yeah, John had interviewed him like a week before the game for Art of War stuff, and then he was like, oh, I gotta play him round 1.
So what you're really saying is John just hadn't done his homework on the episode he was on.
Yeah, apparently.
He didn't take good show notes.
Yeah, see?
No, that's it's really interesting. It's I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when you guys all come over to us. I know there's a big American contingent coming over for LGT as well at the end of September. So I'm looking forward to seeing if you guys can return the favor and kick our backsides a little bit.
Yeah, you will likely see me at least once this year, besides the WTC.
Well, you tell me where you're at. I'll be there too. That will happen.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
So that is it for stats.
We're going to call it there on the stats section. Normally, here's where we would do our ad break. We're going to leave it off for this episode. Colin gave you all the rundown at the beginning. We will give a plug again, though. Remember to remember to stick around at the end of this episode. We will let you know when we're done, and then Colin will be sticking around for a little bit to answer any questions regarding the launch of the Best in Tabletop Network. We're really looking forward to seeing what you guys have to ask and what Colin has to say about the most interesting things you guys can come up with. And based on how the Best BiffPod Discord has been going, I'm sure there'll be some interesting questions and also some good questions.
Yeah, give him questions. Try and make him frazzled. If you can frazzle Colin, you're a truly impressive individual because that man holds it together real well. So.
Now we can see him responding to this in real time, and you guys can't, and it's a real treat.
Yes,
Unless
exactly.
I'm on stream at
Ah!
Renegade Open in the final round, then I don't hold anything together ever. The rest of the time, yeah, I'm fine.
Alrighty, so we are into the player breakdown. So we're gonna pick a couple of lists from the heroes of their factions. We'll break down, what they brought. We're not gonna do the thing that is so common in 40k, where we read you every item of the person's list. We're gonna kind of just hit it broad strokes, what they're trying to do, and kind of work our way backwards from there. So for this one, to remove my own personal bias, having played him in the first one, I'm gonna let Innes take Mr. Ziegler's list.
Well, the first one thing I do want to just check on with this one as well. The lists are available on the Best Coast Pairings app. So if you want to follow along and actually read the lists, go and check them out on Best Coast Pairings. The event was LVO, not Las Vegas Open, just to confuse everybody. I was very, very weirded out by that decision because the Age of Sigmar was Las Vegas Open, and it made searching for a pain. So yeah, go and follow them on LVO. You can probably find them on 40k Stats, anywhere like that for some of the top lists. So if you are really interested in following along, do make sure you go there. So, Richard Ziegler, Anthony's nemesis, is that a fair one?
Yeah, he seems to just find me at these frontline events and just take me down. He was my one loss. I still made it into the top 8 at Atlantic City after playing him, but I did lose to him. And then in this one as well, he ended my run this time through. It was a really close game. I think I lost to him by like 6 or 7, something like that. We tried Operation Violence and Operation Robot, took the W there. But what was your running?
So, Richard Ziegler was playing a Mars veteran cohort with a small smattering of vehicle support. So, the standard, a couple of indirect boats, the Scorpius disintegrators, a couple of Iron Strider Ballistari armed with las cannons, a big block of Rangers with all the buffs. I'll tell my favorite story about that in a little bit. And then a whole host of Rust Stalkers, one armed with the Exploding Sixes relic, so 6s to hit, generate 2 hits. And then also one with the Tempercopia, which allows you to fight last. So, it's an incredible amount of shooting, an incredible amount of combat control. And then you have the ability to stack those defensive buffs. So with Mars, you can take the light cover from the Canticles of the Omnicide that the entire army gets, and then you can also add on the +1 save protocol. So all of your generic dudes suddenly bounce to a 2-up save, which is just really hostile for what are they, 9-point models now?
Yeah,
and then you've got the Rust Stalkers. They're 11. Yeah, 11 with
veteran cohort. Yep.
So it's just a very aggressively pointed stat line. You have really good damage output, very consistent damage output based on the Mars chapter giving you rerolls. So you have rerolls to hit on all of your individual Iron Striders, and then Wrath of Mars gives you that little bit of spike damage output to get across the line. Even something like Emperor's Chosen Custodes don't love taking 6 mortal wounds because you fail 1 more than average and you take 4 damage. That's almost a dead bike. Then there's a damage attached to that. It's a really powerful list, played very competently. So the main topic we have on Richard Ziegler's list, because we're not just going to dive into the list when we're doing this, we're going to use these lists as exemplars of the faction, and we're going to use them to talk about the wider meta as a whole, rather than diving into individual players here. That's not really what we're super going for. So is the faction low-key really strong, and the community just kind of abandoned it? We've seen similar results from Mark Cartel, Rickard Nilsson in Sweden, coming over to some of the UK events and performing really well. Do you think the community just gave up on AdMech too early?
I absolutely think the community just gave up on AdMech too early. I'm pretty good friends with Mark Cartel, as well as you, are in a Discord with him where he plays a bunch of TTS games, and his list is even to show that the Codex still has depth. His list is very different from Ziegler's, and he still just, most of the games he plays, just smashes.
Yeah, he took a 1-point loss to Brad Chester's Crusher Stampede in round 1,
Right.
74-73 loss,
Yeah.
and then from there, I think I might have a lot more depth. We saw an Australian event, and I'm going to really apologise, I'm blanking on the name, but there was an Australian event a week ago where there was a Mechanicus defense cohort list, the top forward, playing 12 Castellan robots and 12 Breachers. Just turns out -1 damage is pretty good.
Yeah.
And when you stack that with Lucius defensive buffs, the ability to solar flare Castellan robots with Incendiing Combustors for the Flamers, it's very aggressive. We've been experimenting that for Team Scotland as WC options, because it's just a very, very very different out there list, and I think the community gave up on Epic. I think I wrote the show notes for this, but the community gave up on Epic too soon, and I'm very angry at them for it. But also not, because it means I don't have to play against AdMech.
Yeah, for sure. I actually played against the defense cohort in round 3. Alex Fennel was playing defense cohort, but he was playing it as Metallica, and using a lot of the Metallica stuff to like either get +1 to hit or ignore the modifiers for like the Thunder Hammers that the Breachers have.
Yep, and you've got the Metallic and Lung for reroll wounds, which is just an incredible relic. I think I saw Ziegler speaking about how he was looking at shifting his list over to Rise or Metallica because the margin rolls weren't as good as he was hoping for them to be. So definitely expect to see some melee AdMech lists on the rise. And if you own an AdMech army, go and give it a bit more of a try. Maybe you're missing something.
I think that's the thing too, is that you have to play something very different than I think people envisioned AdMech to play. So like you see a lot of Metallica close combat builds, like you said, and I think people kind of go into AdMech expecting you to be like a gunline type army and aren't really expecting you need to play a lot of Sakarans or other things, or use Lucius, deep striking, and robots to kind of like tricksy your way around the board to get into the right firing position and things like that. And they really kind of want to stand back too much, maybe, but that's just my read. Perhaps of the community.
Yeah, I think that's super common. A lot of the Lucius robots you can afford to be super aggressive with because they have a very irritating buff stack that they can get on them that makes them really inefficient to remove at anything approaching a reasonable pace.
Yeah, because they're something like 2 up armor save, 4 up vulnerable save, bounce back mortals on saves of 6s, and then you're sticking things like only be wounded on 1s, 2s, on 4+, and ignore AP 1 and 2. Yeah. And then they have flamers, so you can't charge them with anything less than a Talos.
Right.
It's a very interesting faction.
Yeah, they're T7 with 7 wounds, which is like a really specifically irritating profile because you shoot a flank
damage 3 and damage 2 just the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Or even the the D3+3 guns. You spike your roll and you're like, that's a 6, and they're like, great, 1 wound left. And you're like, okay.
Well, specifically with damage 2 and 3 as well, which is super common right now. In defense cohort, you're blanking that to 1 and 2, which means damage 2 weapons 7 to kill a Castellan, and damage 3 weapons is 4. That is inefficient. So I want to quickly jump into my favorite story from watching the LVO streams at home. Was Richard's game against Dan Olivas in the 6th round. Watching Ziegler very aggressively posture his squad of 20 Rangers and then play 9 different cards on it with pre-game buffs. And that's the kind of thing you can do with AdMech that you can't do with other factions. He summoned Exodia and had cards left. It was super impressive to see just what that unit could do, but it killed like a Raider and a Venom and had damage to spare to put some chip damage on something else, and just opened up Dan's army on turn 1 for basically no investment and very little counterplay. Because AdMech are an army that can do that, and you have to respect it. But what they can also do is what Richard did in his game against Mark Perry, where he stayed in his deployment zone until turn 3. Because they don't have to do that. They just can. And they can distribute those buffs and have a little bit of scalpel here, a little bit of scalpel there, and then the sledgehammer when they need it. And that's an army that really rewards play skill, which is why I think it did so well in Ziegler's hands.
100%. Alrighty, next up, we're looking into the Custodies. There was a pair of lists that made it into the top 4. We have Matt Laura, who is playing Shadow Keepers, which is a, according to the wider community, an odd choice. I believe that to be true as well. And then we have Evan Thompson, who is playing the Emperor's Chosen, and a little bit more of like what you would consider like a standard, if there can be a standard build within the last 2 weeks that it's been out. So a lot of overlap that we saw here is that Trajan is,
you can say broken.
Yeah, I would go far enough as to call him mandatory was the word I was looking for. And thankfully he's going to get a points decrease because he's not good enough right now.
Well, he might not be a to the last now. That's a thing Custodies do, right?
That actually might be mildly inconvenient. So that's cool.
They might have to run 3 squads of bikes.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh no, terrible.
Rats. I have a great love for those of you that don't know. I have a deep, deep love of Smash characters. Drazar is my favorite thing in this game. But Trajan, in the games that I've been playing around with Custodes a little bit here and there, just to like better understand from their point of view, Trajan is also basically just as fun. He doesn't fight twice every time, but you only really need it once, unless you're trying to kill like multiple Talos units with just him, which is a heroic move, but probably not the most strategic. He is truly truly monstrous in melee.
I think he is a fair shake for one of the 5 best characters in the game, and that's a topic for another another podcast. But
Yeah.
he's up there. The man does everything. He is resilient. He hits hard, and damage 3 is a fairly unique profile in Custodes. So he does get over the line in a few other ways. Things like work buggies, where you're he's hitting strength 8. He's hitting that strength 8 threshold and damage 3 means he kills them in 3 shots, whereas the bikes are doing it in five. Yeah, it's rough. And if they're not charged, they're not getting that person to wound. It's bad. So he fixes a job. He also gives you CP. He heroically intervenes 6 inches. He does everything you could possibly want.
Yeah, he provides rolls of 1 to hit
on
and
top
wound.
of that, he's a lieutenant and a captain.
Yep.
For an army that
rolls
hits
his
on
own
2s.
hits in combat.
And as a special character, he gets chosen traits. Like he gets the trait for a thing that only Tyranid's got before this, and I'm quite jealous that someone else has it now because I am a hoarder of my my cool things.
Yeah.
So Trajan, and then between the two we saw a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences. The dreads are fairly popular. The bikes are fairly popular. Matt wasn't running any, but Evan was running a fair suite.
Yep.
The codex seems to be fairly toolboxy. You can run more or less whatever you want from the good units, so to say, and in some combination it will work. And then it's piloted by 2 very competent players. Watching Matt and Evan play over the weekend was very interesting in watching things like how they play around their heroic intervention options. It definitely doesn't seem like an army that requires a huge deal of... I'm trying to put this in a delicate way that doesn't make it sound dismissive. It's an army that feels like it has a lot of options, and there's not really one you can go wrong with. As long as you're playing it at a baseline, there's a lot of skill expression in there still, but it's hard to lose a game off the back of a weaker play because you have the bailout options of make your unit only hit wounded on 4s, turn off rerolls, tanglefoot grenades if you get caught on a bad flank. So it has a lot of get out of jail free cards that a canny player can use to really propel themselves to the point where you're hitting. We had 2 of them in the semifinals and 1 hit the finals. But overall, they still had a really consistent win rate, even with players who were newer to the faction. But we definitely saw fail cases for them as well, right? They were vulnerable to getting shot off the board in a few matchups. You don't get a lot of models. So, Anthony, you've played against them a lot more than I have, and you played against them at the event. What was the experience like? What's Custodes' win condition in a game, really?
So I feel like one of the things that they're on the other side of the coin real quick is like one of the things that they're very vulnerable to that can feel bad as a new Custodian player is if you have a matchup, and I would never ever blame dice for a loss, but Custodes are in particular very vulnerable to not even like a disastrous rolling scenario, but even just like one standard deviation worse than normal, you lose a lot of points very, very quickly in Custodes. Their win condition to me, like in a perfectly executed Custodes game, often looks something like controlling the engagements, with fairly conservative play early, because often people will commit resources into you, and then the Custodes will still be there after they've committed resources, and that trade up is in a much different way than what we saw with something like Good Stuff Drukhari, where you would put something on an objective, they would kill you, you would kill them. That's like the complete opposite. Custodes are, you're going to hit them. An amount of them will likely still be there afterwards. I saw this, night, like right off the bat in my first game against them in the round 4. I played against a gentleman playing Emissaries Imperialis who have a pre-game move. Important to note, that's on a core unit, and those spear dreads that destroy things have core. So that mad lad launched a spear dread 18 inches across the board before the first charge phase and charged into a unit of Talos and just clean killed 2. Didn't consolidate into the last one. And then in my turn, 4 Talos shooting him and then 3 Talos charging him didn't kill that guy, and he killed the 3rd Talos for free. Sometimes they just live. And with the offense that the new book allows them on top of the cheaper stratagems, them just living isn't like, oh, okay, we'll get them next turn. You're going to get hit like real hard at least once before that resolves itself. And again, like all their characters have like these really unique abilities to like Custodes in general, not even just their characters, have this ability to do what I've been calling like going coast to coast. Like they'll hit you with 12 attacks and you will take 12 saves. Like they're all gonna hit, they're all gonna wound between Trajan rerolls and their high chances of hitting, wounding. They have rerolls, they have pluses to these various things. You're likely ending up taking all the saves that they have attacks, and even if you're -1 damage like I was, it's not going to save you like when there's all this high AP damage coming your way.
Yeah, because Talos aren't banking on their 4 invulnerable save. They're banking on a combination of their toughness, the chance to bounce things with the invulnerable save, and then the feel no pain. So it's a really, really good profile for dealing with stuff like that. It's obviously not perfect because Talos sometimes just heat lance you. And just equally as much as the 4-up invulnerable save is a win condition, it's a loss condition.
Yeah, 100%.
It is. That's the coin flip you take when you play a faction that banks on an invulnerable save like that. So the basic gist of it is that I'm getting from this is that they're a trade faction in the way that everything in 9th edition feels like a trade faction, but that they have this unique capability to trade their CP instead of their units when they don't want to use their units. Which means that if you're a player that can really leverage those CP, then really know when you need to use it and when you should just let something die, you can get a lot of mileage out of it, as we clearly saw. And I'm really interested to see where Custodes go forward, because there's clearly a second build there that people wrote off, and we saw the Art War guys go. I think Jack and John went 10-2 with their build with like the 20 models. So there's probably a third build there, which is slightly different to the rest. I'm excited to see where it goes, especially after the points drops. Where they just get like a free bite and attack on every model.
They get just a free knife stapled to everyone's hip, which really helps.
As a horde player, that sucks. Like my favorite thing to do in 40k is to put 200 models on the table, and when the Custodes are killing an extra 25% than top, like you don't want that. That's not fun.
Just get an extra 1 a turn, or an extra 1 per dude per turn. It's that's not going to feel good when they have a lot of extra attacks, because like I was saying, even on the stupid knife, they're AP2, I think, and it's strength 5
AP2.
Yeah, it's going to hit you, and it's going to, if you're a horde man, you probably don't have a great save.
There's also, I want to just touch on the low key one. If you need to not kill something, getting that Misericordia for free helps a lot as well. Like if you want to pull a wrap, you don't have a close combat weapon to fall back on, and you weren't going to pay 5 points for a Misericordia for that. But now that you've just got it, like that opens up extra little conditions that you can really abuse with Custodes now. Like you really don't want to finish off that last Armiger, but a lance is going to put holes in it. But one Custode with a knife, probably not.
Nah, it'll probably be fine. Right. All right, cool. Next up on the list, I guess I'll let you do this one, Innes, because you're gonna have to point at me.
Oh, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Just talk about Anthony as if he's not here in it.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Let's do it.
You need to say some nice things about some elves. I'm sure you can find it within you to do it.
Well, give me just one second while you introduce your list, Anthony, because you can run through what your list was. Yes, I just need to center myself.
Yes, no problem. Yeah, let him get it together. Even harder than being nice about the elves will be being nice about me. All right, so my list was the one, the only, the Thick City, the big boys. I've gotten a lot of flack for playing it thicker than others. I don't have a lot of racks. I don't have a lot of OBSEC, but dead models don't have OBSEC, so that doesn't usually come up a ton. So our goal is to get in there and inflict the violence on people. I had 2 games that were streamed. Those were 2 of the more violent games that even I have ever played. Against Ziegler, I threw a Raider at him, turn 122 inches, and against Lucas, both of our entire armies were almost dead at bottom of 2. So we got in there and we hit people. My army is all artists, so it takes advantage of the fact that a lot of it is -1 damage. We have 10 Grotesques, 6 Talos, 4 Kronos, and then we got the king himself, Drazar, as the warlord, and he holds hands with his buddy, the Archon, who applies fight last to things and then watches Drazar kill them. In case that's not enough, he's also got the Jin Blade and a fight twice, but we don't really use that very often. We kind of just let Draz do the work that he's meant to do. And then aside from that, there's like random troop units and a Raider, and that's pretty much it. There's not a lot in there. There's a 6-man court, and we kind of just, the little units run around and do like objective nonsense. They'll rob, they'll hold objectives. I don't feel like sitting Talos on in the early turns. If you kill them early, that's fine. I'll just take your objectives from you with the Talos, and then we'll sit over there, and everything's going to be fine. But yeah, that's basically the list. We run and we kill, and cool. That was good enough for 6th.
So let's start with the first bit. Those streams, you can find them at one of them was War Games Live, or were they both Frontline?
I think both were on the Frontline Twitch.
So you can find both of those at, I believe it's Frontline Gaming _TV on Twitch. You should be able to find the VODs of that. They're Annie Renea's games. Do you know what rounds they were off the top?
One was the Shadow, so it was real late, and then
so that'll be the end video of day 2.
Yep, and then one should be right off the top of day 3 because it was the first
cool. So
qualifier.
Game 6.5 and game 7. So you should be able to find those at the end of the day 2 and start of day 3 videos if you want to watch some of Anthony play these lists, which I recommend because the man is violent and it's very impressive.
Yeah.
So as I understand the Talos list, is you are basically playing a pressure wave. There are a lot of lists that have been like this in 40k. This is definitely the best iteration of it that we've seen at the moment, possibly depending on another version of when we talk about Crusher later that's very similar in how it plays. And the Talos list, it doesn't let up, and it aggressively overperforms in terms of damage output and resilience for points cost on Talos because of the Arts of Flesh. You get more damage out of your CP because you're not using them on things like the Strife stratagems. You have access to things like Rerolls to Wound, which will help Grotesques and Talos, and even Kronos in a pinch, punch up. And then you have access to some of the janky shenanigans. You've got the Court of the Archon for Bodyguard. You've got Fire and Fade. You've got Raiders with Advanced Aid with Sales charging people turn 1. So you've got all the tricks in the toolbox that Dark Eldar usually have, and then you back it up with just a wall of "this is mine, come and take it, you won't." So the main thing that we saw with Thick City coming to this, and I hate calling it that, Anthony, I'm so sorry, but it really just I can't take it seriously.
I love more than anything when in a serious conversation people have to use my silly, stupid name for that list. It makes me so happy.
So anyway, the Talos list.
No. Say it right, Innes. Say it right.
Anthony's list.
No, still not
Almost.
right, Innes.
So the Drakari list with all the Talos.
No.
I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm not,
we can keep going. Drazar's Coterie
was probably one of the most prepared for lists coming into the tournament. Because it's been a known quantity in the meta. Like I played against it at a tournament 2 months ago, and that was when it was already, you'd been playing it for a while. It's kind of existed since the November balanced data slate, and before that it was a fringe thing. So we've seen 4 months of this. Was the meta prepared for Talos? Did you play against a lot of people who had good game plans that you outskilled or outplayed? Did you see a lot of other Talos players that had rough times just because, well, people came prepared for the list? Because I didn't see it put up great other numbers. Like it was mostly just you, and Raphael had a similar list, but it was slightly heavier on shooting.
Right. I think a lot of what we saw is that, what I experienced, I'll start there before what we saw, is that I played a lot of people who, in the nicest way possible, thought they had a prepared game plan for a Thick City. Because the typical wisdom in the world is that if you kill the Racks, the list goes off the rails. In my list, the Racks rod and are ablative wounds in the Raider for Drazar. So if you kill my Racks, you've accomplished basically nothing.
You've got half the wounds on Drazar.
Yeah, exactly. You've taken 9 wounds out of Drazar's 15 total. If you count the Raider, he's got 25. But anyway, so a lot of people would run after my OBSEC or try and take like one of my home field objectives through these plays that also kept them out of charge range of the various elements of my list, and in doing so allowed me to almost like play solitaire with it, where like I was just setting up what was best for me while disregarding their, like, you know, they had their game plan and that was fine, but a lot of what I'm doing is herding them into a corner so that I can deliver the final hit. Often what I'm trying to do early is baiting out defensive stratagems so that I can vect them and make them more expensive so they can't use them when I actually do connect. The best example of that is against the Custodes player I played in round 6. He charged me in his turn on the bottom of 1, and I was able to get him to use the turn-off rerolls against my Talos unit, and I was able to get a Vect on his reroll turn-off on turn 1. That is huge in that matchup.
That's potentially like 6 CP gone, because you might use that your turn 2 or 3 times and every turn of your opponents.
Absolutely.
And you're willing to only use especially when you're playing like 10-man bricks of Custodes, and you can put a squad of Talus, you can maybe put like half the attacks into one squad, half the attacks into the other.
Yep.
And he's going to turn off rerolls on one of those. Like, fine, who cares?
It's trouble in that scenario. And the big thing, the play that ended up blowing that game open was Draz being able to hit a unit of Custodian Guard when he only had 2 CP. He couldn't shut off Draz's rerolls, and Transhuman doesn't do enough there. And
anything functionally. Like, I'm winning on 3s instead of, or I'm winning on 4s instead of 3s, or 2s.
Exactly. Well, 2s, but whatever. It's re-rolling, so at that point it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as much as it otherwise would. But yeah, I did definitely see a lot of other Thick City players struggle. They would play into like one of the various things that obviously people brought to counter them and run into like a wall. Good friend of the podcast, Tim, ran into like 60 Hellions or something crazy. Some absolute mad lad was like, I'm going to kill your monsters with these dudes, and you can't interact with them. And then they did.
Yeah, that as far as plans go, playing Dark Eldar to beat Dark Eldar is,
it works.
That's some Thanos stuff. That is, I use the stones to destroy the stones. And
that's right. Yeah.
Like, we're happy for you, but you're not a good person.
Yeah. You do what you can. You do only what you can in this life.
I feel personally slighted and insulted by this whole. No.
So did Talos underperform overall? Like, Nathan, you'll know this from the stats. Was Talos like the bigger, or did they fall a bit?
It's hard to parse it a little bit because we've seen Drukhari lists change a little bit more as of late. So there's been a lot more people running real space raids, and a lot more people running what I like to call thick witches. So they're bringing in Succubi instead of Drazar, and they're bringing in some witches instead of other things. And this last weekend, I saw somebody bring a real space raid with 10 incubi. And we can talk a little bit about some of the other tournaments at the end of it. But I was like, go tell your own story, my friend.
I'd much rather play against those than on any list.
And they won a GT, though, the same weekend as LVO, mind you. But they still won a GT with it. They won a GT level event with it. So you can still play kind of off meta a little bit, as long as it's something you're comfortable with, and still win at GT level events, I think. And
yeah, that's fair.
It's borne out in the data. Because your decisions with Thick City are kind of how thin do you want to make it? How svelte do you want your Thick City to be by adding racks into it?
None.
And so, like, Anthony's of the opinion that it doesn't need to be svelte. Bulk it up as much as possible, full of protein. But you've also got people on, like, the completely other end of the spectrum who are like, why don't I just make Thin City and bring 170 to 195 racks and just bury you in bodies, right?
Well, I suppose that's a decent segue into the other Drukhari list, because we can touch on that a little bit. Anthony, you don't rate Thin City. I think that's a very good place to start, because that list didn't do bad. It went 6-1. It dropped the shadow round to a hive mind list that you could have tailor built to kill it, and it went 8-0, 7-0 at Nottingham. So combined 13-1. It's pretty good for a list.
It is a good performance for a list that I personally do not think is good. I think it's fine. It takes a lot of what the unique strengths of Drukhari are and turns it into a weird Imperial Guard list, and that wounds me in my core.
It's Plague Bearers, but good is how I would have described it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Imperial Guard, but fast, gets my point home more, because it just dies to bolters. Like, if you play like the one random dude that's like, I really love Imperial Fist, you get slaughtered, and that's not okay. You can't lose to Fists as Drukhari. You shouldn't do that.
Or you lose to somebody who has Tesla Devourer Gaunts with Chapter Master rerolls, who then kills 150 of your racks in 2 turns.
It's an unfair comparison, because that does kill everything. That is the stat check to end all stat checks.
I also died of that, for what it's worth. We don't make it through that one.
Like, I've killed Mortarion with that combo. Like, there's not much bigger than Mortarion.
The only thing that beats this Termagants is the clock.
No, I need you to roll each of those individually, please. Yeah. Yes. I want you to slow roll your 75. Yeah, you can't fast roll that. You got to roll them individually to get your explosions. Please, Kay, thanks.
On top tables, Alex, I think, legitimately would have had a problem, because there was like 40 stream dice that we had that we could use. It was like 40. Good luck. Godspeed.
Well, you'd have also had the fact that you were going to spend 10 minutes setting up for the stream as well and lose that off your clock time.
That's true. Yeah, you get burned by the... Well, and then we had to set up the terrain, and we had to have a chat about the terrain.
Yeah, I mean, I had the
No,
bad
it's
misfortune of playing into Tyler Bortel with a differing version of Thick City that I was trying out moving forwards on TTS, and watched him just obliterate things with Devourer Gaunts.
Yeah.
no,
And
they do real good work.
it was a very painful experience to watch like every durability factor that I've ever seen work wonders into other things just vanish in a haze of like alien boar beetles essentially killing everything. It was a very sad day.
Yeah,
It's magical. It truly is.
100%.
For
The
you,
answer
it is.
the answer to Thick City, or just even the rack stuff in general, all like the entire time has been to take volume of a strength that isn't 3, and just throw it at them, and you will eventually kill just everyone. That's why this entire time AdMech has been well positioned to do this, because between Rangers and Vanguard, they could just put the beats on you. They don't even need to, like, one uses one strat, one uses the other, delete all your racks, delete all your Talos, boom.
It's
Now
also rough when you get collapsed on by something like fight last on one squad and then the army into the rest.
Yep.
Because you just lose. You're very good at combat control with Drakari. That's one of their big strengths. And we've seen a few armies come out since then that are quite good at it back. So Admech are one with Tempercopia. The Crusher Stampede is quite good at it with Harpies particularly. And Gene Circle as well now have 2 really good sources of fight last. So do you think that's going to put a damper on Talos going forward? Obviously, we're going to see them lose Dark Technomancers because you're not skipping Arts of Flesh. That's already the boat you were on. So where does Thick City go from here?
I think a lot of if Thick City were to be like unchanged, like if it makes it through the data slate, and I'm saying this with the firmest of hope in my voice, and it's not gonna happen, but if Thick City makes it through the data slate untouched, I actually wouldn't change much. A lot of the new changes in missions that push you towards having troops doing your actions and not rod monkey stuff already is how Thick City is accomplishing that. At least is how I have it built. The rods and changes like that, a lot of how I accomplish that are larger court unit or a troop unit. Every once in a while, it's my grotesque unit. Those games are a little weird, but they do happen. But I think that it's generally well positioned. I mean, you and I spoke for hours the one day about how to like beat Thick City with GSC, and then we were like, oh, you just put fight lasts on both and hit them with everyone. And we got it down to a point where on average you do kill them. In those games, the issue will be, what if you don't?
Making it happen.
Yeah, making it happen, because it was like, oh, you use all these stratagems and all these powers and all these units hit their charge, and if that doesn't happen, that's bad. B, sometimes you'll connect and the Drakari player will just laugh and roll his saves, and C, the clapback from that is going to kill everyone, so your go better go, or you're going to have real trouble on the follow-up.
No, for sure. And that's something we'll look into probably next week. We'll go into Gene Circuit a little bit and see where they've landed after the city, because there wasn't any great performers from LVO to really dive into. We saw some decent results, but we're not going to dive into Gene Circuit this week. So if you're waiting for that, chop back in next week.
Yeah, we'll touch base on that there. That is a good segue, though, because up next is Forces.
And this is, I gotta say, this is my favorite list that came out of the weekend. It just is. So the list we're going to be talking about specifically is Alex McDougall's Forces of the Hive Mind list. Forces of the Hive Mind, for the uninitiated, is the frontline approved name for the combination of Tyranids and Gene Circle, playing both armies. But we also saw Tyler Patel play this list, and a few other people played similar. We're going to dive into this one, which is broadly 2 big squads of Devouragants, a 6 of Hive Guard, some characters to make that little bit work together. So you've got, I believe it runs a squad of Terror Warriors plus 1 to hit, a Neurothrope for some psychic powers, and a Maliceptor to provide either AP1 to the Gaunts or reroll damage and the extra AP on 6s to the Hive Guard, which just makes them much more consistent, especially to things with -1 damage, because you just chase those 3s on the D3 because there's no reason not to. And then we combine that with a Twisted Helix detachment of probably Anthony approved incredible violence. You're looking at a Patriarch. You're looking at 2 squads of Gene Stealers. One with They Came From Below, which gives them a 9-inch pregame move, which happens after you reveal blips, so it's during the first turn. And you get to place it off of any blip you want. So it's a very powerful. It's like a redeploy into a pregame move. It is incredible. And then a Goliath truck, and then some acolytes. One squad with drills, and then 2 5-mans, just for doing things like rod, action monkeys, grabbing you engage points. This list is incredibly tuned to do basically nothing CP-wise with the Gene Circle half. You may be looking at chucking out a CP reroll on a power, or doing a board-wide cast on a power from the Patriarch, because the Patriarch gets to know 3 powers, so you can use +1 attack, make a unit fight last, and 6 to hit auto wound from the Twisted Helix specific power, which just gives you a really good suite of toolbox. So you can do double buff powers, you can do a debuff power and a smite. You have 4 options from a single caster who can cast board wide for buff powers, and then you have all of your CP go into the Tyranid half. So you have double shooting, exploding 6s. You have overrun. You have double move for getting a squad of Sky Slashers or something like that into any position you want. It is just an incredible amount of damage output packed into a very small package, and then a very self-sufficient scoring and pressure detachment. And it performed incredibly. I think that's fair to say. It was probably the breakout list of the tournament, in that it was something that we had not seen coming forward. It was a completely new innovation in that we hadn't seen the Gene Style Codex do anything yet, because it's new. So it's understandable that it was a breakout hit, because it couldn't have existed before, but people weren't expecting it, and I think a lot of people got caught off by it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely, if I had not been kind of like in a lot of the like circles that talk about that stuff, I would have been caught dumbfounded by that list. The efficiency of like the individual pieces of it at the specific job they're meant to do is crazy. They're so good at the individual things they are, there to do. I think this is one of those lists that's almost, it's going to be rough if you're new, like just jumping into. It's got an extremely high floor, but it's got the ceiling to go with it. Talking to people, in the like after the shadow and into the top 8, and like just discussing with everybody, I think most of the top 8 felt like McDougal had just the strongest list of the lot of us, and it was just going to come down to, if he was able to execute through the mental fatigue of 10 rounds with the shadow included.
Playing
and
a list that rolls a lot of dice.
A ton of dice. Each decision point's super important. It's not like the list itself is easy to play on top of the mental fatigue, like I was just saying. So those are all factors, I think, also, by the way, just as a general thing, that contribute to how strong a list is. Even if something is like power to power, head to head, weaker than the other, you have to keep in mind the human aspect of these. People are going to make errors, like how, I'm going to burn my curse here. How fuck up resistant is your list? And can it bounce back from that?
I'm totally inviting myself in as a special guest now, because for one, we can't tell people that Alex took the Walkrent version. He hates that version. So that we gotta correct. Alex takes the Neurothrope version.
No, that's what we said.
Okay, good.
Neurothrope.
All right. 2 different people messaged me, so I must admit, so they must have misheard. Those people are wrong, and you're right. That better?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the Walker is terrible,
right.
and I'm only saying that because it'll wind Tyler up.
Okay. And then the second thing is that I played this list over the weekend after taking a break from 40K. I came back to play some 40K and played this list into Chuck, and holy crap. I just wanted to share that. It is ridiculously powerful.
I'm the last person to burn my curse, and you've all 3 done it.
Crap is not a curse word.
Oh, it feels
crap
like
slides. Can you say it in church? I don't know. What's the parameter for a curse now? Like, where do we?
The only person who could tell.
So, like, I took a few months off from 40K for a bunch of reasons, partially because I wasn't going to get to go to LVO, and I was bummed about it. And so I come back and I play Alex's literal LVO list into Chuck playing New Point, New Mission Necrons. And the game was really fun, but like, it's ridiculous how much damage Alex's list does. Every piece of it, the Acolytes, the Termagants, the Hive Guard, everything is just crazy. And since I just found this out firsthand for myself, I thought I would invite myself back onto the show to share that.
Yeah, I was playing the Warzone Octarius version of the list with the pre-Codex Gene Circles, and you just win some games off the back of the damage output. And the scoring got better, and the combat got better, and the combat got cheaper for CP. I'm probably not going to be playing much of this list. It is something that I would love to if I was exclusively focused on singles, but that's just not the path I choose to walk. but man, does this look fun, and I'm kind of glad that Nids Codex is coming because I don't
Okay,
think it's
because
a
this list
particularly
has got to
healthy
go.
list.
No, it's
Yeah.
no, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It has to go.
Power
But
votes should probably be going up.
because
Anyway. I
remember
think
that
that's
it's also one of the jankiest lists in the game as well, right? Like
Yeah,
it can
Yeah.
things can run over to your objective and just be like, "Hey, I have OPSEC now," and you're like,
Yep.
"Oh, I'm gonna get a 0 on primary while you're killing my army." That's not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
So to
it
dive
is.
into a couple of the specifics of why it's so good at stealing objectives, just to jump off Colin, the Gene Cycle stuff all gets 6-inch deep strike if it doesn't charge. So what you used to have to pay 3 people for lying in wait, you now just get half of
that.
anyway.
Yep.
So if you leave an objective kind of unattended, like most objectives are about 7.5 inches of control zone from end to end. So if you just tow onto an objective, you can just lose it for basically free.
Yep.
And the second one is the Kellermorph is disgusting. I think is
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that
You
guy
get to
works.
drop it 8 inches away and then move 7 inches because you're Twisted Helix, you have +1 move, and then still charge and then fire on death with your pistols. The guy is insane for 80 points in Alex's list because he's not playing with Crossfire.
He,
Fact
lit up
list is good.
Drazar. He just killed Draz when Alex played Manny. That the Keller was just like rooting, tooting, shooting, blew that man off the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you can do really crazy stuff with stratagems, right? I think we mentioned it very briefly before because you can knock off an objective holder if they've got like a backline objective or something,
Oh yeah.
and then run away back into strategic reserves for
Yep.
later if you need to. And all of your trade pieces have built-in durability of just being able to, if they trade appropriately, just run the hell away.
Right.
And
And that's not even
come
to
back
mention
late.
that the 8th edition portion of the list, the Tyranids got all the double goodness of the double
Mhm.
move, double fight, double shoot, all the things. Yeah, that stuff is
So,
pain.
To close out that talk, Anthony's very wonderful statement at the beginning of dead models don't have OBSEC. Do
Yeah.
you know what doesn't have
Mhm.
defensive stats? Is models that aren't there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Also true. Yeah.
You cannot take damage if you cannot be shot.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah. Being invisible or dead is basically how that works.
So
All
yeah, very very impressed with that list and super happy to see it. The last faction we are going to touch on, this was a suggestion from Nathan because we were kind of struggling for a Space Marines list. Because they're such a big faction, even though we didn't have a great showing from Space Marines LVO. I'm a Space Marine player at heart. They're my first army. I've been playing Iron Hands a lot recently because they're really good fun. Nathan, do you have to hand what the stats were for Space Marines at LVO?
Oh, I do, and it's terrible. Before I do that, I have gotten several direct messages about David, and David is a Kiwi, is what I've been told repeatedly.
David is a Kiwi,
Okay,
but he does live in
so-
London.
Yeah, he lives.
So I'm very sorry to all of the people from New Zealand. David is, in fact, from New Zealand.
Is that just like 8 messages?
You guys
from
are
Alex?
all. It is just 8 messages from Alex about how he's not from Europe. And it's fair. I'm going to issue this because the Australians and the New Zealanders have been extremely helpful with getting in touch with people for my meta article. So, and they've been lovely so far about it while I pull up the stats for
So Anthony,
Marines,
if you
which are
put- if
bad.
well, let's do a quick break with Anthony for the beginning of this. If you pulled Space Marines, what's your feelings at a tournament?
Drukari beat Space Marines into the ground like few things do or should. My whole army basically is multiple damage with good AP. I've said this before, and I still think this is true. I think I could do a 5-round event against if I played 5 Space Marines in a row. I think I could still win if my casualties persisted between games. I think that's possible.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it if I played Iron Hands at any point early because Iron Hands kill me.
Everything.
Yeah,
And then
the Iron
they
Hands make
lose
me-
by a little bit.
Yeah, Iron Hands make me very dead and barely lose. I'd have to play them in round 5. But I think you could do it. Just a lot of
If
their
it's like
stuff-
salamanders straight through, like
Yeah, if I play like
Yeah.
Fists, then Salamanders. If I play Blood Angels, that's right, Jack, including them. I think I could do it. But yeah, it's rough. They're in a rough spot right now. The the meta kind of ran past them because they're like, we're good at shooting and at combat, and we're pretty tanky. And then the meta was like, very nice. This army is better than you at shooting and is faster than you. That army's better at all three than you. That army's called Grey Knights. I'm sorry. Like there was a lot of like,
Yeah.
you
The
know,
only success I was able to find with Space Marines, and I know the
Is
Deathwatch
Grey
Army
Knights.
Renown has had some decent success recently. Michael Costello in the UK, massive shout out to him, has been putting in work with that. Fred Fortman, Fred Fortman
Fortman.
at LVO did really well. He almost took Sean Naden down. It was very impressive to hear about, and just a really rough end of the game. So yeah, but Iron Hands are the only thing I've been able to find like success with, because bodyguard abuse is real and Vanguard are still great, and
and
people
that
underestimate
Contemptor's a real
Vanguard
jerk.
consistently. And that Contemptor is, until Custodes, I think, could mostly kill any unit in the game that wasn't like Talos or Mortarion. That was
Yeah,
like
I believe
five at Field of Pain and -1 damage. That thing murdered it, and it's incredibly unhealthy, and it's still unhealthy. It's just in Space Marines, which means that
it's
that's
fine.
the problem.
Yeah.
So the stats basically say if you don't include Grey Knights, Space Marines are terrible. So Grey Knights are the only book that riffs off of the main Space Marine book that did well, and they're an ATR army. But everything else, including Iron Hands I think is like almost exclusively like a European phenomenon at this point. Like we don't see as much Iron Hands in the data for the United States. We have seen at least one Iron Hands list do really well recently. I just have to pull that up again.
Yeah, there's
But
been some
for
like Land Raider Achilles experimentation in the US, which just hurts me as an Iron Hands player. You would think having I think the entire US just has PTSD from 2020 LVO and just refuses to look at that supplement because their eyes start burning.
There's something
So
like that.
that's what I'm blaming it on, because this was great here for like 6 months and it didn't take off. So I have to wonder if there was something that was just not working, or if people just didn't pick it up. So Space Marines terrible. Do we have the exact stats? I think the stats were something like 148 players, put 3 people to 3-0 and nobody to 4-0, or one person to 4-0, something like that.
So I mean, Black Templars is the best performing non-Grey Knights faction, and they had one player, I think, go to 5-0 in that, or 5-1, and that was it.
Yeah, Tom Ogden,
and that's Tom
dropped
Ogden.
a 45-point game to Custodies, because Custodies are better Black Templars, and then won 5 games with 100 points.
Yeah,
and then Dark Angels is the other one that also went 5-1.
Yeah, like Charlie Andre's 40 Terminators listed earlier. So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to talk a little bit about Tom Ogden's list, and then the last thing we're going to touch on is Crusher Stampede Tyranids, and then we will go into our close. So Tom Ogden's Black Templars is kind of just like the best hits of Space Marines, right?
Yep.
It's like some Vanguard, some Blade Guard, some shooting with, I think it's Eradicators and
Interceptors. Yep.
And then Hellwrecked, and just like the standard character suite. I think Smash Chaplain with the Chaplain on bike.
If I'm not mistaken, he actually took Grimaldus, which is an extremely bold play in my point of view, but maybe that's just because I'm like the patron saint of Assassinate, so the second someone gives it...
Grimaldus is a good choice, because Bodyguard is hella broken, and I have 4 model squad with Bodyguard. It's just good.
Yeah, that's fair. Bodyguard's broken, but it doesn't work in the charge phase.
But like, you got to consider, you're playing Space Marines, you're going to lose to Drakari anyway, so who cares if you give up stuff to Assassinate?
I guess that's fair. That's a totally valid outlook, that if I play you and you're playing Space Marines, you're probably in trouble anyway. Grimaldus,
so like, you might as well win the other games.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. That's fair. He did take Grimaldus.
So I like the list. I think it obviously has a lot of tools, but Space Marines, Black Templars are very heavily reliant on rerolls and like high damage shooting output. So I think it was Plasma Scepters Tom was running.
Yeah, he had the Plasma Boys and he had some
Eradicators.
Oh, he had attack bikes as well.
Do you know what that doesn't line up great into is Custodes and Gene Circle that just don't care about that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's Space Marines, it's liable to getting run over by Hive Guard, Crusher Stampede stuff. Talos can play the angles against it super well. I don't know. Space Marines, like, Tom Ogden's a great player. He 105 people. Like, I'm not going to take that away from him.
Yep. But
the matchup spec for Space Marines is rough. If you're not playing the best of the best and are one of the best, you're going to lose games for free with Space Marines. Is kind of where it is at the moment.
Yeah, you will occasionally just drop them for free. There's Tom Ogden's also just, like, we got Hero Hammer in 40k. He's like the hammered hero. That man just tanks it down and goes in there and wins some games. And...
I thought you were going a very different route with Hammered Hero there.
No. He's the drink tank. He goes out with Brad and keeps up with them and still comes in and destroys people. He's an inspiration to us all. He like like you said, the matchup matrix for them is rough, and if you're not super high level, it is going to be, like you said, the Hive Guard to me, having like played Space Marines in the past and like having messed with Black Templars a bit in practice to give my teammates look, the Hive Guard one feels the worst because you're not fast enough to get to them, so you just die, and like there's nothing you can do if there's a vaguely reasonable ruin.
Yeah. The only option I found is Iron Hand Scorpius. It's the only thing that does it, and it doesn't do it well. It just does it.
Does it slowly but surely.
Like, you maybe kill like 1.5 a turn, and you just hope that the 0.5 happens on turn 1, and you get the 2, and then the double tap just loses all efficiency, and then you can win the game from there. And that is possible.
Yep.
I don't like playing it. It doesn't feel good. So yeah, that's Space Marines. We've seen the Black Templars build. There was a 40 build, I believe it was John King, but don't quote me on that. Played at Leicester GT with the 40 Terminators. Charlie Andre played it at LVO. Both put up very reasonable performances. Is it just worse than Hydar's 30 Custodes list? Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have any more.
I've played both of those. The Dark Angels one is kind of unique in that like all of its durability is built in and doesn't have to spend CP on it. So
yeah, but it doesn't really damage output either.
I don't know. You get hit by those thunder hammers, doesn't feel good. It is a lot less. It's a lot slower and it's a lot less dynamic. And there's a lot more like cool stuff you can do. It doesn't have Trajan, which is obviously a massive downside because Trajan is nuts. But yeah, I definitely was more like overall. I definitely had a harder game into Hydar than I would have done, I think, into the Dark Angels. But that's hard to say because he is just a specimen of a player. He's super good. So I don't know how much of that is his list versus him. Because I've never played anyone that played anything even vaguely like that before. I wouldn't have even thought to prepare to play something like that. So yeah. So I think we're
the last touch on with Space Marines I want to really cover is that in the upcoming they're losing double secondaries for a bunch of the factions.
Yes.
So that will hit like Deathwatch are one that gets hit by that. Long Vigil is quite a decent secondary, which is the one where you have to keep things away from your deployment zone.
Purge
if you're
the
playing
alien.
something like Hammer Naval, Purge the Alien as well, yeah. Not being able to stack Oath of the Moment with Stubborn Defiance. There's a lot of hits coming for Space Marines as well, and then also points nursing chapter approved, which are not what they needed, frankly. And I think that the future for Space Marines isn't great. And we need to see what's going to come for them later.
Yeah, the data slate, or maybe they get a run back on the old book, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we're waiting for Space Marine. I'm waiting for my new Iron Hand supplement that just gives me back as many March of the Ancients as I want. I want all my character credits back.
Yeah, they don't lock the Ironstone again. They just make all the same mistakes.
No, they should make Ironstone reduced to 1 damage. That would be bad balance with the current Space Marine book.
Tannhauser's bones, but an Ironstone.
But applied, like that you point at a Redemptor.
No, bubble.
A bubble.
Oh, a 6-inch bubble of Tannhauser's bones for all vehicles.
Look, if that's what it takes to get Stormspeed or Hailstrikes off the ground, like, you can't imagine GW not doing it.
Listen, you can have that the minute they make Hatred Eternal Aura.
Cool.
I just want witches to be pure strain gene stealers again, if that would be okay with everybody.
They are. You can get reroll wounds. Pure strains can't do that. They're just going to rely on 3s.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Crusher Stampede, the biggest, the strongest. I get outthicked by these boys. They are wide body, heavy lads. They make my intimidating Talos feel small and insecure. David, I want to say crushed it, but it's too much. It's too much. I can't do it.
You're making
devoured the competition.
Yeah, there you go. Because they don't have devourers, so devoured the competition doesn't hit me in the pun bones the same way. I played next to him a couple times. Honestly, the 2 games I played next to him, he was done on bottom of 1. Like, he shot and killed and charged with the Harpy, and his opponent was like, "That's enough for me, thank you, sir. I will go get a drink now." He had the Dima and the Harpy in their deployments on turn 1. He double shot with the Hive Guard, and the game ended. Crusher definitely has the potential to be one of the more toxic lists in the game. It did not live up to its beloved nickname of Midzilla. I thought that was the greatest thing ever, and it didn't pan out. It just murders people.
It's a good list.
Yeah, it just is good instead. If it sticks around, if they don't just like make it only for narrative play and Tyranids get a new book, because like the weakness of the list as I see it is that when they run out of it's that, and when they run out of CP, they're just like that army in my eyes is good stratagems stapled to bad data sheets, unless those data sheets are good and they're Forge World data sheets or updated book data sheets, and then it's just terrifying. So I don't
Yeah.
know what that's going to come to look like when they get a new book, but I am deeply, deeply worried. And maybe the downtrodden, since I have played the game, never good Craftworld Eldar, the true undercurrent heroes, the downtrodden, weak Craftworld will
I
rise
am going to
up.
pop a blood vessel on this podcast. I can feel it.
So I will say that Craftworld Eldar are the lowest ranked of all of the stuff on the spreadsheet for participation and being good.
There you go.
Nurgle and Craftworld Eldar,
Good.
and Nurgle is a subfaction of demons.
See?
So I don't care how bad Ninnis is going to turn like bright red, and then like dissolve into a pile of goo midstream.
Man, I got 10 years of vexation stored in here. It's not going on anytime soon. I have lost more years of my life playing against Craftworld than you two have played 40k combined.
Dude, I started playing the game when the Iron Hands Codex released. As far as I'm concerned, the Craft Worlds are just the downtrodden Gene Stealer cultists of this game, waiting for their
Why
time
did you
to rise
keep
up.
going?
Must resist urge to mute Innis.
You knew what you were buying into when you invited me to this.
That's true. I kept going because I didn't play Iron Hands, and I was like, I didn't know what was going on. I picked up the game and I started playing Chaos Knights, and my robots looked real cool. And when I shot thermal cannons and I got to roll 6 damage, that made me really happy. And I was just I was a simpler man at that time. I wasn't as competitive, and it seemed great. And then I won 2 games and 2 tournaments, and I was like, all right, we need a new faction. And I started playing Blood Angels, and that was also the wrong choice. But we got there eventually with Drukhari, so we did it. But anyway.
Perfect.
Crusher Stampede.
The last question I really want to ask on Crusher Stampede, because it's not a particularly nuanced list.
Right.
We've seen some variants of it. We've seen the Harridan variant. We've seen in the UK triple Demacaron or like 2 and 2 of the Hero Duels is fairly popular. They're all like they're
Triple Dema is gaming, sir. I love
own
that.
3 and I've played it.
awesome.
It's good fun. It's basically you're starring the same like 7 data sheets and seeing what falls out.
Yep.
We're going to see some changes to it with the new codex, with the new balance display, because we've seen points increases on Hiveguard, Demacarons, and points decreases on a couple of other monsters, Haruspex, X-Crane, and Turnifex. So we might see a little shift in what they're running. But the main thing is losing Rod, basically. The list can't take it anymore. I think that's very relevant because it was already struggling for its third secondary, and now it's kind of struggling for its second.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what the future has for Crusher Stampede until the new book drops. And then I'm looking forward to seeing it, be a white dwarf that was fun for 6 months and then stops being a thing.
Yeah,
but the question that I really have to ask is when, like, we're talking in 40k communities online, you see a lot of people talk about Crusher Stampede as like a gatekeeper list or a meme list, and not actually that good. Crusher Stampede's not a meme, is it? Crusher Stampede's just a good list.
No,
It's
Crusher
good.
Stampede has all the tools to take you it's one of the best lists I've ever seen at just surviving. You throw something at it, it just eats it, like literally and metaphorically. And most armies only have so many, goes, for lack of a better word, that if 2 of them fail, and now you're getting hive guarded and big monstered and you're getting head-butted for 6 mortal wounds, you're going to lose that battle of attrition very rapidly. And I definitely don't see it as a gatekeeper. But I also, there was definitely a lot more panic, I think, than there needed to be when it first came out. It didn't, ruin the game. The game's still great. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
But it's definitely also a very real list.
Yeah,
that...
It's like, I would have had it in that case of, it's one of the best lists in the game. It's an S tier, a high tier list, whatever your perception of it is. But, we had, I don't want to call him out here, but Alex McDougall on the show saying, he doesn't fundamentally think the Crusher list can beat Forces. And then he played David Gallagher and won by 2 points.
5, I think it was. It was
5,
90.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was real close.
You got to respect this list, man, because if you dismiss it and you just get run over by it going first or it having a good turn of saves, it's the same thing that Custodies do, where they can trade, they just trade on their resources so effectively, and you can sink 5 CP into something that really has to die, and if that wins you the game, it wins you the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
I don't think I've ever seen the meta pivot so hard to Crusher Stamp, to a single meta archetype of list. And so the first week that I started writing the article, was like the week that Crusher came out essentially, and not a lot of people transitioned to it. And then the second through this week, almost all of the Tyranid lists now that run just Tyranids are Crusher Stampede lists.
We all
There was
had
one-
all of it already.
Yeah,
it was.
but you get from Crusher like all of these stratagems and like little efficiencies that you didn't have before, I think. And I think either you, Ennis, or Anthony made the point just like a few minutes ago, is it's a lot of really good stratagems stapled to not great data sheets. It was Anthony, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the space it exists in right now anyway. When they get a new book, like if they just like put good data sheets in there, like if Hive Tyrants are what they should be, like, oh no.
I mean, it's
No.
Tyranids. We never expect good things in the Tyranid community. We have been burned before many times. We've also ruined the game many times before. Like rule of three is our fault, guys. So the Tyranid community is not innocent here.
I am too new to the game to have that level of pessimism. As long as I've been playing, every release has been just insanity, except for Necrons.
Yeah.
So like every time something comes out, it's been like, oh no. So I see the new Tyranid book coming, and I'm like, oh boy. Like even just the stuff we've heard about Craft Worlds is like, uh-oh. Like every single time we get something, they've apparently just embraced balancing, being like, yeah, it just goes to 11 when it comes out, and maybe we'll get it to 10 later, or maybe we won't. And that's just how the game works now. I love that. I want everything to be as crazy as it can, and let's just all play with the crazy tools, but some people obviously don't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So I think that's going to be the end of our LVO breakdown. Do we want to jump quickly into what we're going to be covering next week? Close it down.
I can touch really quickly on the fact that there were other tournaments other than LVO
Were
this last
there?
weekend.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I
noticed
promise.
based on any of the coverage.
Yeah.
I
was
know,
I was
but
in a bubble.
I do want to at least call out like the Cape Town Throwdown event, which was South Africa's first big event that happened over the weekend. Was a GT-sized event.
I think it was actually a major. It hit 58 players based on what I saw.
Then
I think it was the only other major of the weekend. So.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
So it was their first major in South Africa, is what I was told by the tournament organizer for that, Ashley. And then he also put me in contact with some people, so you can get the Q&As from some of those players a little bit later in this week. But LV No also happened in Canada. You had Factorum in the UK, and then No Respite in Australia, as well as GTs. So we won't really talk about those in depth, but there were tournaments other than LVO, I promise.
We saw some fairly interesting things. Drakari won Factorum, which was one of the Goonhammer guys, so props to him. He's a good friend. It was good to see some interesting things. The reason we're not covering these guys in depth, guys, is because the meta basically stagnated. As far as we're aware, none of these events ran the new Warzone Nachmund. So based on the fact that we're going to be jumping in next week to trying to talk about the impact of that on the meta and what shifts we're seeing and how you can respond to it, we don't think it's particularly relevant. We're closing out the season with LVO. The rest of the events kind of get sidled into they happened and they're kind of irrelevant now. But LVO was big enough that we kind of covered it on principle.
Yep. Yeah, it was the close. It closes out the 2021 season. I mean, I've in full disclosure, I've barely looked at the 2022 stuff because the LVO prep was so intensive that it required all of my focus. So now, fresh eyes into the 2022 season.
Now that makes sense. And yeah, I viewed LVO, especially from a statistics perspective, as a capstone event because this is the meta before 2022, and 2022 may throw everything kind of a gimbo. We'll kind of see that in the next few episodes, I think, as we cover tournament coverage in particular and lists. We'll see some things change, I think. Maybe some things won't change so much, but like Custodies will still be there
soon.
and be better, but we'll see.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right.
So,
but yeah, we will be covering some events. Oh, sorry, Ennis.
Go for it, Nathan. You can close it out.
Oh, sure. I was just going to say, so we're going to be talking about some other events next weekend. So we'll be talking about WIC GT Sweden. We'll be talking about the West Coast GT in Sweden, Cross Swords in the UK, the Iron Cage in the United States, Captain Khan also in the United States, Legion Events GT in the US, and then there aren't any majors, just all those GTs that we'll be looking at for next week's episode.
Yep. We're going through, breaking it down, looking at all the new stuff.
Yeah, and if we find any of those aren't covering the new Knockman stuff, we may skip them, but we'll do that on a case by case basis, guys. So apologies if we shout it out and we don't end up covering it. It'll just be based on how relevant the information is.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Cool.
Do
All
you
right.
want to take questions from chat at all or anything?
Yeah, if you have some pulled up,
Hey,
spit them out. And
I'm back.
oh, we got a Colin again. Here he is.
Yeah, so guys, that was great. Let's call this the official end of your first episode, but I'll hang out and answer questions.
Cool.
So,
Sounds good.
guys, man, wow. That was so wonderful. It was even better than I hoped it would be. I really enjoyed the energy and the enthusiasm, and I also enjoyed how you guys all interacted with each other and how you came across as such friends. Just really, really wonderful. So thank you for that. I sat here entertained the entire time. I have some questions about the network, so we'll take some of those. And then let's also take some questions for these guys about their show. It's their show, not mine. They get to do whatever they want now, within reason. They get to do whatever they want now. So let's see what we end up with. But a few questions
I've
about the
got
network.
one from Sam
Yeah,
quickly.
go for it.
Team event will be a focus because I'm here, and I will not let them not be.
Oh, man.
I will make them. You can, I promise.
Yeah, the creative director also has strong opinions about team-based formats. I'm like literally yesterday being like, will I be comfortable going to big tournaments by July 12th so I can go to ATC? Like, can I wear a hazmat suit? Like, what do I do here? Okay. Let's see. Will you... Oh, where'd they all go? There were a whole bunch of questions, and now they're all gone. Here we are. Okay. Will you guys be expanding beyond the 40k Outward Realms and some MCP? Yeah, you bet. I just don't play other games, so you can't have me in charge of making content for games that I don't play. I need help with that. So I know we were going to want Age of Sigmar, and I also wonder if there's space in the community for a game that covers all of the GW product that's not 40k and AOS. Because now there's a lot, and a bunch of it has followings. Like, there's Kill Team, and Titanicus, and Necromunda, there's just a lot. So, I don't know how those games get covered, and how popular or not popular they are, but I've played some of them, and I know they're great. I adore Blood Bowl. A Blood Bowl podcast at some point in the future makes sense, potentially. Will each of the shows be live or pre-recorded and uploaded? Completely depends on the show. Chuck's hobby show will be recorded and uploaded. The rest of the shows are done. No, that's not true. The Outward Realms show is also being recorded and uploaded, but the rest of the shows are being done live. When do I anticipate the start of Phase 2? It depends a lot on how many people decide to be patrons. But in general, 90-ish days is when we'll start releasing the second set of content. And am I open to new shows? Yes, absolutely. If you have an idea for a show that you think the tabletop community needs that fits in my the ethos here of good humans, you should make sure to come to me. Be aware that if I don't know you and I don't know anybody else you want to do the show with, it'll take me longer to get comfortable than if we already have a relationship. Let's see. We had a few other questions about the network. I'll see if any questions come in about the show. How long until they get official 40k Fight Club soap, Ennis?
As soon as Anthony feels like donating a pound of flesh, we can get on that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a few that I'm trying to get rid of, so we can get that going
Yeah,
at any given point.
Ooh.
I mean, we could get that going, lickety split.
That was all gross. Okay. Why do you? Well, I mean, I get the Fight Club reference. We should have put some reference towards Meatloaf in this, as because he just passed
food?
away. No,
Yeah, the
the
singer.
food, you young people. The food.
I knew the reference. I am young adjacent.
He would
now.
do anything for love, but he wouldn't do that.
That's true.
All right. Why do you think the BiffPod universe, which I think is great to call it that, will grow when there is so much content out there already and that has saturated the market? Do you believe Do you believe you offer a unique angle on a number of these shows that will grab a demographic previously untouched? What a great question. I do not think that content for tabletop gaming and 40k in specific is actually saturated. I think if it was, we would be losing content rather than gaining content. I actually think that there is an incredible amount of content that is hobbyist produced. What I mean by that is 2 guys in Minnesota do the Minnesota 40K podcast. There's a ton of that. The only people that are trying to do an entire network of shows, to my knowledge, are Frontline Gaming, Art of War, and of course, I know Honest Wargamer does a number of shows as well. We aren't doing what any of those people are doing. And also, we're launching with 7 shows. Like, we're just going to make a lot of content. And you're going to listen and watch whatever you like, and you're going to ignore the rest of it, and that's okay. It's a TV channel. It's a TV channel focused on tabletop gaming. It's not a bunch of individual shows where I need you to like all of them. That's not what it's about at all. So it's going to be about, network-wise, I think we are a bit in a unique space because there's a lot of people doing what we're doing. But show-wise, I think that's where it really is. I think that there's every show that we've launched in phase 1 has a specific room, has a specific space for it in the community that I believe needs to be filled, or I wouldn't have endorsed them doing the show. So I think that's a great question. I just think there's more room for content. I also think that you can build a company on this, to be completely open with you guys. I think that there is money in gaming. And you don't have to be jerks about it, and you don't have to hold people upside down and shake them till their money falls out. There's just money in in the community. Like, I'm completely comfortable asking you guys to pay us $10 a month to support all the free content we're making. I think that that's a ridiculously small amount of money. The reality is that if even a percentage of the people that travel to tournaments did that, we could build a giant network. Like, this is just not an economically difficult thing to do. And since it's not, I'm going to put myself on the line, and with a few other people as well, and we're just going to make the best content we can. And I think there's room for that.
Yep.
This network does have real heart. Thank you for that, RPG Luminary. Can we please get some clarity on why the narrative has changed and people are calling Thick City Drukhari Covens?
Because Innis is a curmudgeon.
Yeah.
And doesn't like the name of it.
It doesn't make me sad when people don't use it. I just think it's really, really, really funny when they do. Like, having to have people, like, serious... Like, I watched someone, all caps, yell at someone else in a Discord the other day, like, Thick City, in that, like, if you don't feel ridiculous, like, angry typing about Thick City... Come on, man. Like, that's so good.
With the double C and everything. Like,
yeah, 3, sir. It earned its 3rd one.
Did it?
How dare you? Yeah.
Okay.
And then
it became a real list.
The final question, and the one I've gotten a few times, is what's happening to Biff Pod? Nothing's happening to Biff Pod. Biff Pod is just being pulled in to be another one of the shows on this network. And it will continue to be done by Chuck, Mitch, and I. And we're going to continue doing exactly what we're doing, whatever that is. And amusingly, as we were writing the show synopsis for everybody, I realized that the Biff Pod synopsis is weird. We kind of just do whatever we feel like, and people tend to like our show. And I appreciate you guys giving us that freedom, because I am the sort of brain that bounces around and asks 15 of their friends to make 7 shows all at the same time. So, yeah, fantastically great. Will this podcast do speculative content, especially as Eldar are on the horizon, or is it just review?
We can. I mean, we can talk a little bit about it, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I have nothing against doing speculative content. I just want to make sure that we're doing it once we have the full picture. Nothing drives me personally more crazy than, like, the book comes out and, like, everyone is like, that's broken, over something that, like, no one's going to use in a week. So I do like speculative content. We can point at things like, oh, that's generally a strong thing. Look at it to impact the meta this way. But, like, the full crazy, I know as the let's go man in the room usually, like, this is one of the few times that I'm not, like, the full crazy, like, drives me crazy. So yeah. It's a balancing act there.
I'd like to say, I hope that you saw a little bit of that in what we were trying to cover today. So, like, when we covered Thick City, we tried to dive into... You know, I'm going to give it to you. It's 2:30 in the morning, man. I'm going to give it to you. We tried to cover what is it doing now, and where do we think it's going to go in the future? And that's a lot more interesting to us of covering speculative content, is that how is this going to have to adapt, and how is the meta adapted to this, rather than saying, like, we just take Eldar specifically as a codex, we read it and we say, I think that the meta is going to change in this way, and this way, and this way. But when we talk about how lists are going to adapt to things, it's going to be a lot more useful for us. So how is Crusher Stampede going to adapt to a specific change, like losing Rod? That's a much more interesting question to me than how is Crusher Stampede going to react to the 2022 changes, because it's too broad a topic for us to cover in any detail in any way that's going to be satisfactory to you guys, while also having enough information to really, like, for us to dive into the meat of, because it's just going to be me and Anthony and Nathan spitballing ideas of, yeah, it could change like this or it could change like this. We're gonna make that content when we feel like we have something to contribute, not when we feel like we have to fill some time.
Yeah, bear in mind as well, the specific change like that gives you, like, you know, as a viewer, a better insight into, like, how us as, like, the players, you know, going out there and putting up the results actually view these changes. Like, I don't ever look at something like the Tau Hammerhead ignoring invulns, and I'm like, whoa, like, that's like a, you know, it's cute, but, like, it's not going to affect the greater meta and how I develop scoring and strategy for a given event. I think a lot of the times it's easy to lose sight of the, you know, you miss the prey for the horizon because you're looking at the wrong things.
I'll do that on Twitter, though, so please feel free.
Yeah, following us on Twitter if you want some crazy reactions.
Also, from a statistics perspective, like, when we talk about, like, we want to also, like, Biff Pod was before the tagline "Do Your Homework" podcast is, like,
No, the Show Your
to me
Homework
is, like,
podcast, Nathan.
Show Your Work.
Show Your
podcast,
Work.
Sorry. Whoa.
Yep.
But, like, what I want to bring to is, like, a statistics and analysis kind of portion of this is I can't do statistics on people getting mad about something before it's released into the wild.
Yep.
We
So,
can
like,
try.
we could talk
That
about
sounds like
Tau.
fun content.
Yeah, we can get mad about things. Like, we could get mad, like the community, about hammerheads before they're in the wild. But I think it's better instead to see, like, what Tau lists come out. Some of the unit crunching that I've seen done in the Discord is really illuminating about what we might see in lists. But I think it's important to see, like, how that actually comes into the meta. And, like, are we going to see every list that top 4 have 3 hammerheads or not? Like, that I think is more interesting than being like, oh no, 3 hammerheads.
3 broadsides and a sky ray is your heavy support. Probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm super more, like, in general, right? I'm less interested in, like, the complaint about the meta and more like, what do we do with the meta? Like, it's going to be there, what do you want it to or not? So your options are to adapt to it or to stop. And I'm not going to do that. So let's be, you know, for lack of a better term, grown-ups about this, and we will adapt to whatever crucible of flame GW turns this meta into. And
You guys did such a good job of answering that question that I want to take your answer and pivot it into a statement about the network. So I wear a shirt all the time that has pictures of data and lore from Star Trek The Next Generation and says trust data, not lore. For those that are Star Trek fans, that joke makes perfect sense. For everybody else, as a world, we produce entirely too much misinformation and pass it off as real, and people change their happiness and their worldview and the way they literally do things based on that information. So as a network, we will not be spewing misinformation, and part of that is when we talk about what's coming, that stuff that's coming will be talked about with what we actually know, with the data, not with the lore. And we won't be freaking out and worrying about what the rules say when you only have a third of them. We're going to do complete data analysis here. That's the way the whole network's going to be. If we decide to do a show where people flip out about the future, well, then that can be that show. But as it stands right now, especially in 2022, more than any other time in my life, I'm going to be really specific about us having everything we say based in data.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's also another interesting question in chat about
terrain.
If we'll focus on terrain changes for each regional meta. For me personally, I get pictures from some people of what the terrain looks like at their events for the article, mostly from Australians and New Zealanders. But if you want to send me pictures of your terrain layouts so that I can incorporate it into, like, some... It's hard to incorporate good versus bad and, like, how to make that into a number for stats, but it is useful for putting an asterisk on some events so that we can talk about it, about if the terrain is good or bad, because that will change what good armies, like what armies are good at events.
The real answer to that is we'll discuss it when it's relevant, and we won't if it's not. If we're talking player placed, like if we've been talking about LVO as a smaller event in context of another event, we may have talked about player placed and how it affects the meta. But because we were just talking LVO, it's a little less material. If we're looking at a WC event, it's probably fairly important to cover to you that WC terrains are dense. And there's a lot of dense terrain on them in terms of like the actual -1 to hit, which changes mechanics. So when it's important, we'll cover it. That's what we're here to do. We want to make sure that we're bringing you the most relevant information. And when the terrain is relevant to the conversation, we'll try and do that. We can't promise we'll always get it right, but we will always try.
We will do our best, which is all we can do at events and on the network. Our best. And
I think that that's a great place to stop. I think you guys have done a absolutely stellar first episode, and I say that with 100% sincerity. Really pleased with how this came out. I could not possibly be more excited. I am really excited now because I now get to spend the next several days talking to people about this rather than keeping things secret, which I'm not actually good at. So look for everything to get rebranded over the next week, and then come back on Saturday at 10 a.m. and listen to and watch the Best in Faction The Next Generation show. And then on Sunday, you can come at 10 a.m. and watch Best in Faction. And then next week, so yeah, you get the idea. You know where to find us.
And next time you get to hear our intro music, so you definitely want to come back because
that's
really good.
And then next Tuesday, at the same time this was at, whatever that is in your time zone, next Tuesday this show will be on again, only without Colin. So if you think, man, I wish there was less Colin on this show, well, we got that. We got you covered. So thank you, Nathan, Innes, and Anthony for agreeing to go on this journey with me. Thank you, everybody, for your amazing support the last several years that made me feel confident to back all of this. And we will be back with tons of content very soon. And let us know what you think and give us feedback so we can get better. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.